It's time for Twit This Week in Tech. Return of Will Harris, our old friend from London. He'll be visiting with Lisa Schmeiser from IT Pro Today. And, of course, Alex Lindsay of MacBreak Weekly, Office Hours and 090 Media. We've got a lot to talk about. Fighting Zoom fatigue. We'll talk about the huge Microsoft hack that's putting 60,000 organizations at risk. And then what Google's doing to eliminate third-party browser cookies. Is it really for the public good? It's all coming up next on Twit.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twit, This Week in Tech, episode 813, recorded Sunday, March 7th, 2021. Zoom dating. This Week in Tech is brought to you by ExtraHop. When cyber criminals get past your business's defenses, you need a plan for detection and response. Learn more about how ExtraHop stops breaches 84% faster and explore the interactive demo at extrahop.com/twit. And by ZipRecruiter. Hiring is challenging, especially with everything else you have to consider today. But there's one place where hiring is simple, fast, and smart. That place is ZipRecruiter. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/twit. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And by Barracuda. Hackers are always looking for the weakest link in your security configuration, especially in your email security. Barracuda's new Threat Analyzer tool helps you gain visibility into your particular vulnerabilities. It's easy. Visit barracuda.com/twit. And by Uber for Business. Right now, for a limited time, receive a $50 voucher when you create your first vouchers campaign and spend $200. Go to uber.com/twit to learn more. It's time for Twit This Week in Tech, the show where we cover the week's tech news. Oh, I'm going to have a fun time on this panel. Alex Lindsay is here schooling us on how to do this.
Hello.
He's the king of office hours, 090.media, and also on Zoom today, which looks kind of a lot better than Skype does and sounds fantastic.
Yeah, Zoom's put a lot of pretty great tools into their audio, so I think it's come a long way. It was way behind Skype, and then I think it kind of passed it.
Skype is we've been using Skype for 15 years. You know who knows that well, better than anybody? This guy right here, Will Harris, who is back on. You've been with us for as long as almost anybody. It's great to see you, Will.
Good evening, Leo. It's great to be here. Great to be back. It's been a while, but it's also been, I remember when we were first trying to cobble this Skype stuff together.
Yeah.
A decade and a half ago or something.
It's all scratchy.
We've come a long way.
A long way.
Or not at all, depending on how you look at it.
Alex and Will go back to the cottage days.
Yeah.
So, Will, you're in the city, the real city, London.
I am in the real city of London.
In the real city, where it's about 10 at night. So thank you for staying up with us a little bit.
It's always a pleasure.
Will's got a new startup. Every time you're here, you have a new startup. This one's cool. Entale, ENTALE.com. It's a
very cool way of listening to your podcasts that delivers some kind of contextual information with some very neat AI that we've developed during the pandemic. We've been heads down and just coding away whilst the world carries on around us.
How cool. Are you always going to have a new company? Like, is that who you are? You love doing that? You must.
Yeah, I love new things, love anything exciting. And, podcasts have always been, as you know, close to my heart. Yeah. So always about trying to, to improve that experience.
Also with us, because it is International Women's Month, we have a woman. Ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Lisa Schmeiser. Great to see you.
Hi.
Now senior editor at IT Pro Today. Tomorrow is International Women's Day. I was just informed by the women in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to hope I'm on the show for reasons other than my DNA makeup. But
I totally. I think it's important, I guess, that we do some, pay attention to that and do some diversity stuff. But I don't want to pick people just for their gender or race or creed or whatever. I mean, I feel like you're here because you're a tech journalist, a smart person.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And because we all share a love of Zoom fatigue.
Well, actually,
apparently we do.
You represent the ginger segment of our audience. Have you always been this much of a redhead, or is this finally we're getting a decent picture this time?
Yeah, I think maybe the internet connection is a little bit better, but also lockdown has brought out a little bit of the inner
ginger. I love it, the inner ginge. Yeah, actually, we might as well. You know what? Alex Lindsay last week said I have to get onto it because I read this ridiculous press release from Stanford about Zoom fatigue and why we get it, and I have to debunk it. And then what's funny is we put it in the rundown. It's not high up. It's kind of low down on the rundown. But Will just spontaneously, as he signed in, said, I've got to talk about Zoom. And then Lisa said, yeah, I just wrote an article about Zoom fatigue. So we have 3 experts on Zoom fatigue. Let me tell you what Stanford said, then you guys can weigh in. Stanford, this is the headline from Stanford press release, stanford.edu. Stanford researchers identify 4 causes for Zoom fatigue, and then they offer simple fixes. It's not just already Lisa's laughing. It's not just Zoom. Popular video chat platforms have design flaws that exhaust the human mind and body, but there are easy ways to mitigate the effects. Here are the 4 reasons. Too much close-up eye contact. It's overly intimate because the size of the face on the screens is abnormally large, and on Zoom calls, everyone's looking at everyone all the time. There's just too much eye contact. So they're quoting in this report a journal, Technology, Mind, and Behavior. It's the first peer-reviewed article that systematically deconstructs Zoom fatigue by Professor Jeremy Bailenson. And Bailenson says the fix for this is take Zoom off the full screen option, reduce the size of the Zoom window. I always watch it in a grid mode. I don't know what's wrong with that. Relative to the monitor, minimize face size. And use an external keyboard to allow an increase in the personal space bubble. I'm going to move back. Let me increase the space bubble between myself and the grid. Number 2, seeing yourself during video chats constantly in real time is fatiguing. And of course, the fix for that is just hide your own view. 3rd, video chats dramatically reduce our usual mobility. That's true. When I'm on the phone, a lot of times I will walk around. I find myself, I look up and suddenly I'm outdoors. I don't know how that happened. So I don't know what the fix is except to move the camera farther away so that you can move around. Maybe he says pace and doodle. And finally, the cognitive load is much higher in video chats. During a long stretch of meetings, give yourself an audio-only break. Turn off your camera so you don't have to you don't have to be non-verbally active. That is true. I've seen I saw a TikTok where a woman was on a Zoom meeting, very lively and stuff. As soon as she closed it was like, oh, I'm so done. What's wrong with this, Alex?
Well, I mean, I think that fundamentally, and to be fair to the researcher, is that he does say in there that this is theoretical. Like this isn't like they did a bunch of research. I mean, they didn't do the research at a full level. Most of this isn't peer reviewed. This is a bunch of ideas.
He designed what he calls the ZEF scale, the Zoom exhaustion and fatigue scale.
Right. Well, and you look at, when you want to talk about bias confirmation, this is like a textbook of bias confirmation.
Yeah. How much do you hate your Zoom meetings?
Yeah. Like it's all like
fill out this questionnaire. Yeah.
It's just insane. Anyway, so the problem really is that some of my background is that we've done in the last decade we've done over 2,000 events. Over 1,000 of them for Google, doing Hangouts in the early days.
Almost all video, right?
All video. No, all we've done
is
not. I mean, I've done a lot of other things. We streamed, I/O and Facebook F8 and stuff like that. But the vast majority of the work that I work on is only using online tools, whether it's Skype or Zoom or Hangouts before that, and all of these other things, is using these tools to allow people to build these meetings that occur all over the world. They're global, what we call centerless events. They don't have there's nobody anywhere. The speakers are somewhere in the world.
I think that's
the
part
viewers
of
are somewhere in the world. And
is this kind of decoupled from the earth feeling.
Well, we look at it as not being constrained by time and space. So,
that's another way to say it. Yeah.
Amazing way of putting it.
Framing is a very powerful device for figuring out how
to as someone who's worked on virtual events and physical events for the last 2 decades, physical events are really exhausting.
I'm starting to love these virtual events. Yeah, just to do a questionnaire after CES. Talk about fatigue.
Exactly.
That's exhausting.
And the thing is that we've prepped over 6,000 participants. And I mean that means that those are the people that are actually talking, interacting with each other. And so a lot of the stuff that they're talking about in here is kind of absurd. And so from someone who actually does it, not someone who has a bunch of good ideas based on things that they thought. And so, I know they have a great.
I'm sorry, Dr. Bailenson. I'm sorry.
I know they have a pretty diploma, but the thing is that there's actual field work that's actually useful. And so from the field work, the biggest thing is solving a bunch of, there are etiquette issues of how you manage a room and so on and so forth. But the primary things that change the comfort of the Zoom experience is your technical setup. So if people in the room improve their audio first, just don't sound bad, don't sound echoey, don't sound far away. And that's like a $30 fix. There's like $30 mics you put on. It's like 80% of it will just get fixed. Then internet, like Wi-Fi is the devil, like for this kind of thing. Wi-Fi was not built for this. So as you know, the first thing you do when you get somebody on is like, let's get them off of Wi-Fi. Do you have an Ethernet? And we when we're prepping people, we're like, hey, how far away is your router? And they're like, oh, it's 75 feet. And we're like, okay, we'll send you a cable. And so because Wi-Fi affects it, then after that, lighting and then video and then their environment. And when you start to fix those things, and most of those are not particularly complex fixes, they can be. I mean, my fix is complex, but for the small kits that we send out, the thing, and we send out probably 50 to 60 kits a month, 50, 60 kits a month. They're relatively small fixes. And what happens is suddenly people, they look good. People get tired of looking at themselves because it's like their worst self. It's down below them, looking up their nose with bad lighting. Of course, you don't want to look at that all day. But when you're well lit, like I probably look 2 or 3 times better on Zoom than I do in real life. So I don't, like when you're set up that way, you don't necessarily want to give that up. So I think that's the
so
that's the issue.
In other words, if you're going to decouple yourself from space and time, you might as well look good while you're doing it.
Well, but again, what happens is that you get a lot more comfortable with it. You get, you have good audio, you have good video, and you actually have better audio and video.
The fatigue comes from the low quality of the signal.
Well, I'm going to say that there is that, but I think there's an element of Zoom fatigue that the article has really kind of missed in its, it's looking at, it's great to look at the quality, and I agree with everything Alex said. Like, my life improved drastically when I got a camera that I could look straight into rather than a web camera that was, attached
which
to my
by
laptop.
the way, is exactly what they tell you not to do. You don't want to have the eye-to-eye contact.
No eye
contact.
contact.
You want to avoid.
Yeah.
And I'm we spent thousands of dollars on making sure that you can do that.
Yeah. So I think the problem that I found with Zoom fatigue, which this article completely misses, which is again, to Alex's point, the danger of doing things theoretically rather than practically, is that in a world where video is kind of your only form of communication, then every problem is fixed with a video meeting. And the problem is that we have become completely subservient to this idea that every single interaction we need to have ends up being a Zoom meeting. And if you went, I know from working in an office, when you get to talk to your co-workers, you have an interaction that is walking past each other in the corridor. And you have an interaction that's like overhearing somebody and then yelling at them across the room and asking what's going on.
There's variety.
Yeah. There's this huge variety, but when all you've got is like a Zoom call, then suddenly everything that you do becomes a Zoom call. Yeah. And so you completely lack any variety. And so I will find that, in an average day in the office, I might have a chat with someone sat next to me, a yell with someone across the room, stand and work something out over by the coffee machine, and lunch with somebody. Whereas when I'm sat, in pandemic times with Zoom fatigue, it's like I've got a 30-minute meeting with this person on Zoom, followed by a 20-minute meeting with this person on Zoom, followed by a 1-hour meeting with this person on Zoom. And it's like when all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think that for me has definitely been the real kind of Zoom fatigue issue.
I think Will brings up a good point, however, inadvertently, because when you start talking about Zoom, there's a cognitive load that goes along with having to schedule all of your interactions or having to set up the Zoom meeting and then go through the kabuki ritual of, is your camera on? Are you mute? Are you not mute? Whereas when you have spontaneous interactions with a coworker in an office, you don't have to do that amount of work just to have a conversation with them.
Of course,
and,
for me,
yeah.
that's part, yeah.
Go ahead.
But
sorry.
That's part of it too, is when you're in an office, like you said, there's a lot more shouting across when somebody's working or not working. It's a little bit more interstitial. You don't have the work associated with we've now gotten to a point to having a conversation, and then there's more work paid to that conversation too. Microsoft Research released some preliminary findings last summer, and this was in their research lab, where they found out that people's attention span in Microsoft Teams meetings tended to flag at about the 35-minute mark. And they had done brain scans and other things to figure out why this is the case. And they said it's cognitive overload, because even when you have people on grids, you're still habituated to looking for signals like eye contact or who's talking. And the research has been foundational to some of the ways they've zhushed up the Teams experience since. But I've thought a whole lot about how over the past 6 months, Microsoft's been paying a lot of attention to the cognitive load that goes along with video meetings and what are the tech steps to change that, versus some of the things I found when I interviewed people who are like, the answer is to make your meeting shorter and then to get up and move around and do things between those meetings so that you don't feel as if you're just a pair of eyes staring at a screen for 10 hours a day every day.
Speaking as somebody who's been doing this for 15 years, you get used to it.
Well, the other thing is that,
like, do you cross train for it?
I think that
I have been.
I mean, I think that from number one is that I prefer everyone to schedule stuff. If you don't know me, like if you call my phone, it basically tells you need to email or text me, or I'm not going to pick up the phone. I don't want to.
Alex,
I don't want that.
You and I are preternaturally suited for this environment.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, it's as if we were born with Zoom gills.
Yeah.
Not everybody is.
But the thing is that, so for instance, there's we did a bunch of eye tracking research, and this is.
Did you? Wow.
Wow. This is a decade ago. So we were looking at training and when people start paying attention, and these are in these very early WebEx and so on and so forth. And one of the things that we found is that if you talk straight for 6.5 minutes, it's about 6.5 minutes, people stop paying attention.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah,
they don't leave; they just start looking around.
They zone out. You start sounding like the teacher in a Peanuts cartoon.
It gets better. It gets better. If you put up a slide, it's 60 to 90 seconds.
Yikes.
They stop paying attention. And so we learned very quickly to get rid of the slides because they were just destroying people's view time. And you're getting put into passive mode almost immediately. The thing is that one of the things is it's a matter of how people are engaged. So one of the things that I have a meeting every morning, 7 days a week, that lasts anywhere from 2 to 5 hours.
Is this office
straight.
hours or is this another meeting?
No, it's office hours. So office
okay.
hours, there's 200 to 300 people that show up for at least 2 hours. I mean, our average view time is 82 minutes. The energy at the end of the meeting is generally as high or higher than the beginning of the meeting. After 2 hours, the official meeting, and then there's 2 hours before that, that's the unofficial meeting, and 1 hour after that, that's another unofficial meeting where people keep talking. And so, when I hear the whole 35-minute thing, it's cute, but it's like we do this for a long period of time, and we do it every single day, and people are engaged.
Your experience
yesterday. We did 8 hours straight.
You're just
we took
nuts.
10-minute breaks.
But you're just nuts. But your experience is a little different too, because from your point of view, you're doing a show, aren't you? Don't you feel like you're doing a show, like you're hosting, like I'm doing a show right now, right?
Right, but that's
a different experience. But that's a completely different experience than sitting in a Zoom meeting, which is absolutely draining.
Well, it's how you structure that Zoom meeting. So one of the things we do is we do almost no. There's almost no lecturing. There's no long talking. There's no presentations. We deliver that ahead of time. Like, you get that ahead of time, and then then we discuss it. So everything's about discussion.
Right.
You know, and so and that's what engages.
I think
people.
it's what you're doing is significantly different though than the Zoom calls that most people have, the work calls they have, which are boring.
Leo, let me tell you the absolute worst Zoom experience, Leo, is having done this, as I think probably possibly the only person here who might experience this, is Zoom dating.
Oh, don't do Zoom dating. Really? You've done Zoom dating?
I tell you what, never has that 40-minute limit on free Zoom connections been more useful than the, God, sorry, it looks like our call is about to end.
Oh, my God.
It was lovely to meet you.
Wait a minute. Now explain this to me.
That sounds great, actually.
Yeah.
Because you have a built-in exit.
It's like those speed dating or a coffee date, which is really designed to kind of, let's see if this is going to even be close. But so tell me how this works. How do you meet the person you're going to Zoom date?
So you use a sort of traditional, one of the more, oh my God, I can't believe this is my life. You can use one of the more traditional dating apps where you're like liking people and looking at their interests and that kind of thing. And you have a little bit of a chat.
So then you say, meet up on Zoom?
And then there's usually and then it's like, do you want to like have a Zoom drink or a Zoom coffee?
Is this pretty common?
Yeah.
This is how people do it now.
It is, unfortunately, the way we have been reduced. Yeah.
I feel like Jane Goodall watching The Apes. I'm trying to understand your culture.
I mean, it is, as you know, as single people during the pandemic, you're looking for anybody to talk to that isn't a coworker or a member of your family. But it definitely gets weird when you're, the Zoom fatigue gets really weird when you are trying to, the whole thing about, having a date is like make eye contact, look at the other person. But then you look like an absolute creepazoid if you're just doing that the whole time on Zoom.
It takes all the worst elements of a first date and
just amplifies all the worst bits and takes away
boils
none
it
of
down.
There's no what's the word? There's no body language. You can't, get a sense of anybody's kind of like, zen. It's all the worst bits combined together. So that is the absolute Zoom worst. So Alex, until you fixed that for me, I'm afraid I'm still going to be.
I haven't had to date for a long time, so I don't. It's not
Lisa, Alex, and I are just watching.
Can you set up some sort of super Zoom room for really high quality dating connections?
Well, I mean, I think that
first thing is it times out in 10 minutes. That's the first thing we do.
I mean, on the other side of it, one of the things that makes our discussion so interesting, though, is that we represent 5 or 6 continents every day. It's 25 people basically talking with or in front of 200 to 300 people, and it's a meeting that could not happen in the physical world. Like it's impossible, like to have it, and that's what's coming. It's not that physical is going to go away. It's just that telling people to do things like turn off your camera. Look, we can decide whether that's good or bad, but it's kind of, when you turn off your camera in the middle of a meeting, it's kind of a slap in the face for everybody else. And so whether you mean it that way or not, that's how it occurs, And so the thing is that telling people to do things that, of course, is better for their personal space and all that other stuff, but you do have to pay attention to how
there's a culture.
There's a culture that you're telling people to go against that isn't going to change. Like that culture is not going to adjust itself. It's not going to just be okay.
Actually, I was going to ask if this is a generational thing, because I've noticed just from a lot of firsthand observation that the young people, children and teenagers, have a very different relationship to Zoom and physical representation and avatars. And I would argue that schoolwork is the same as going to an office for us. It's someplace where they're expected to be and to turn in a high level of performance every day. But these social expectations and the conventions seem to be very different. And it's been really interesting seeing how few of them will pop on camera unless they're absolutely required to.
What grade is your daughter in?
She's in 4th, and my nephews are 10th and 12th.
It's got to be really hard for a grade schooler to do Zoom.
Oh, Lord. Zoom fatigue is real in this house.
But I have to say, my 18-year-old, who's a high school senior, Petaluma has announced that they're going to be able to go back into the classroom in a limited fashion next month. It doesn't want to do it. He said, what's the point? I'm graduating in May. What do I need to go to a class in April for? Yeah. So he's completely comfortable. I mean, this is, for some reason, he doesn't.
Yeah.
I think
I'm just wondering what the relationship might be like for those of us who came of age in an in-person professional environment versus people who have already shifted the bulk of their socializing to a computer-mediated environment, if maybe that will affect their biases towards or against cameras.
So I think the thing, Alex, is that there are those of us, and I shouldn't include myself, but there are people who are doing this because they have to because of COVID. And they can't wait till it's over. School kids, people who are working from home. And then there's people like you and me, Alex, who do this for a living.
Well,
and for us, this is just broadcasting. This is our way of life. And so it's a very different experience. I think there are a lot of people who say, well, of course, now I have to say, I'm looking at Dr. Bailenson survey, and the questions are things like, how much do you dread having to do things after video conferencing? How often do you feel like doing
confirmation
nothing?
Bias.
Yeah, talk about it. How much do you need time by yourself after video conferencing? I mean, it's a little...
I mean... It's again a textbook of confirmation bias, to go down that path.
But I do think that people who don't do this for a living, or who are, I mean, we have other reasons that make this palatable for us. But I think for kids and for people who have to go to meetings and just don't want to, or they want to be in the office, Zoom is inextricably allied with the pandemic.
Well, but I think that also, I think that there is. It's kind of like everybody got pushed out into the ski slopes, and there's a bunch of people that aren't good at skiing, and they're like, "Well, this stinks. This is horrible. It's cold."
That's a good point.
And we're I'm kind of like, if you get some lessons and you wear some good clothes, it's actually pretty fun. Skiing is not that bad. And they're like, "Well, but I'm cold and I'm wet and I keep on falling down and I've got a headache and I'm tired." And and of course it is. When you don't have the good tools and you don't understand how to use it, everything's hard and nothing's fun. And it's not. And I think that we're very good at it because we've done it for a long time. And my job is, but what we see every day when we send kits out is people go, "Oh, I've already done this. I know how to do this." They turn the lights on that we send them, and they take the mic, and they have the good, they have a good camera, and they're like, "Oh, wow, I look pretty good."
They're happy.
And then there's hey, do I get to keep this kit? You're like there's all, and then there's calls like we had a friend of mine had they do the same. They do events, and they come in on A7Ss, like these really nice cameras.
Sony DSLRs.
And they look they make me look very bad. They just look like
Actually, I stopped doing that. So I have a very good camera that I can send video, and it looks too good. It's moody, it's dark, it looks like a movie, and so I stopped using it. I went back to the camera on the computer because there's a weird disconnect. It's like you don't fit in with the Zoom meeting. You're like
but it's like
wearing a three-piece suit to a Twitter panel.
It is, but it's also it's also like
do that.
As a guy, it's like being a 6'2" model, from Sweden. You just walk in.
Everyone's
just
like, naturally better looking.
Some people get to be born with that, but we do it with cameras and lights and Zoom. And so the thing is that. But anyway, they were talking to an executive. Executive was like, "I have to have that," and then they're getting them for all their C-suite because they're like, what people are learning very quickly is whether you like it or not, and whether it's fair or not. What you look like and how you sound on Zoom gives you perceived authority in that meeting.
If you're the boss,
and and even if you're not the boss,
do you make them wear makeup? Do you have them put on makeup? No,
no. Well, for the high end kits that we send out mattify. But that's so
there's no shine. Yeah.
Yeah, we do. So it's an anti-shine. Those are the big kits, though. Those are the kits that we send out that are like 6K cameras. Those are the little ones. We don't do that.
Yeah. Well, Zoom's earnings, this is a related story, came out at the end of January, their fourth fiscal quarter. 369% growth in revenue year over year. 369%. Gross margins went from down a little bit, but I guess, because, but they lost fewer customers than they expected as the pandemic starts to wind down. It was a very successful pandemic for Zoom. They were probably the single company that did the best. I'm curious why you guys think that Zoom, I mean, you write about Microsoft, Lisa. Why wasn't Teams the big winner? Why are we talking about Zoom?
There's a few reasons for that. One, Teams is tied into Microsoft 365 and Office 365, so you had to be an existing customer.
I know Microsoft did have some Zoom envy, though, right? I mean,
oh my gosh, I wouldn't be surprised if they had made overtures, but Zoom
Skype.
took off.
They could have done Skype. Skype could have been the Zoom.
I mean, last
Zoom
last
took
summer,
off though
Microsoft
because
hired.
it had a low barrier of entry relative to having to get yourself set up as a Microsoft 365 customer and then wade through the fragillions upon fragillions of features that are meant to make your life better.
I would guess, though, I would be willing to bet more people had Skype accounts before the pandemic than Zoom accounts.
It is super easy to get started on Zoom. We're not talking about a constituency that likes to spend a lot of time monkeying around with tech features to find the ones they like
You know
best.
who really probably fumbled it is Google, because they had Meet.
Oh,
right?
yeah. No, I mean, it's kind of baffling that Google did not immediately scale up their stuff, especially to appeal to the educational districts, because if you look at how fast Zoom managed to get itself embedded right in virtually every school system in the United States, and they managed to do so in a matter of weeks. And it was an amazing market opportunity for them. And the thing is that Google already had tremendous incursions in U.S. education between the Chromebooks that are cheap and accessible and something that you can outfit an entire school district with, or Google Classroom, which is what a lot of school districts use anyway to do assignments and collaborate with. So it's a little baffling to me, but Zoom just happened to be in the right place at the right time. It's easy to get started. And what a lot of people needed last March was something where all they had to do was click and go.
The irony, of course, is that the reason Google is so far behind is because they wanted to make it easier to get started. So they basically, Zoom, I mean, Hangouts was very basic in 2011, then got built up and they kept on adding more features. They had an API. We built tools that actually tied into it. So we had tools that took over the Hangout and turned it into an entirely different thing, much like Zoom has with things like Zoom OSC. But then what happened was Google decided, they made a shift after they closed G+. They basically just gutted Hangouts. They just ripped everything out of it. It's insanely bad. But that was 5 or 6 years ago. But they were so far ahead, and they had spent incredible amounts of money going down that path, and all they had to do was keep going that direction. There was a lot of us that were doing a lot of Hangouts, 3 to 5 a week for different companies, and we were just like, this is what you need to do. You need to build this. You need to build this. This is how you do it. You can take over the world. And they just completely went the other direction and gutted it. So when it happened, the real issue is that they didn't have things like the grid view, and they didn't have all the back end tools that they had in the past. But the thing about Zoom is that it's really, really easy to get started, but it is deep. Like if you go into when you go in as a administrator of Zoom, when you go into the settings, you have so much control, and you can turn intricate control of what people can do and what they can't and how they do it, and whether it's what's being recorded and what's not being recorded and how it's being put together. So what they've done really well is they have this situation on the surface that's like, I can just turn it on and go, and I can send someone a link and they can just go, and everything just happens really easily. But when you want to turn up all the quality knobs, turn up all the other bits and pieces, you can. And that's what you can't do in Teams. You can't do in Hangouts or Meet. You can't, and those are the only ones that really matter, right? The rest of them are just, they missed the boat. I mean, like GoToMeeting and WebEx and Chime. So anyway, sorry.
My God, these guys, WebEx owned the corporate marketplace even more than Zoom. How come they didn't?
It's always hard for an incumbent to keep up. They're not thinking. They have a way of thinking.
Did Zoom just do it perfectly? Did they just play this opportunity perfectly? No, in fact,
and it's far from perfect.
Yeah,
it's not. There are lots of things about it that are great, that are a poor experience. But the one thing that you can do is one click, join a meeting from somebody sending you a link in a chat.
Yeah,
and that is the most basic thing in the world that you could want to do. And
as it turns out, that's something everybody wanted to do.
As it turns out, that's something that everybody needed. Well, and there are lots of companies for whom tech is a completely secondary function.
Right.
Who, if it's a function at all, that suddenly needed to get good at video conferencing. And this was like literally the simplest way to, with one click, somebody who knows something can set up a meeting and everybody else can join it in a click. and that's it.
Well, our
And
40
that's
minutes,
like,
our 40 minutes is up, and this call is going to end now. So,
Leo, are you going to ghost me now? Are we not talking any further?
send me your number. I'll. What do you? So, I'm still. By the way,
okay.
I'm still intrigued by this whole dating thing. Is this just you, or is this
Sounds
like
horrible.
all of your peers are doing this? Is this like how?
Well, I mean, if it was just me, it wouldn't be much dating, would it?
That's true. It takes two to Zoom date.
Take two to
Yeah.
Zumo.
This is dating in the mist. What? What? Okay. And so have any of your Zoom dates gone? I mean, what's the next step? A longer call?
Generally, the next step in London is a walk in a park.
A walk in the park. Is that a euphemism?
Which is very, very Jane Austen-esque.
It
where
is.
You sort of walk 2 meters apart.
Do you have
from
a
each other
chaperone
and
walking behind you?
and
Did you have to have
discuss
your
what
hands
you've
like
been doing and have no sort
like-
of physical interaction and
I feel sorry for anybody
You know.
who's single during this. This is a nightmare. God. You must
not as much of a nightmare as buying a 27-inch iMac and finding out that it's buggered.
Oh, we'll
from
get
next
to
week.
that. Yeah, we'll get to that. We're going to take a little break. It is fun to have you guys here. This isn't the biggest story of the week by any means, but since all three of you had real strong opinions, I thought, well, why not? Let's play to our strength. Something we do know a little bit about Alex Lindsay. His office hours are on youtube.com/Alex Lindsay. You can watch, recordings of it, but the best way is to participate live with, guess what, Zoom. The Zoom link is on the YouTube comments area.
There's a couple hundred of them on YouTube, so you can watch a couple and decide whether you like it or not.
That's right.
Yeah.
Get a sense of it. Lisa Schmeiser is here. She writes about this stuff at IT Pro Today. Always a pleasure to see you. Is it Girl Scout cookies time?
It is. It is, in fact, Girl Scout cookie season.
What is
it's
your daughter
extended
doing?
to March 31st.
I always, for some reason, associate you with Girl Scout cookies.
You should, because I used to bring boxes onto the show, and I
that's
actually took
why.
orders from your producers.
Oh.
So
Oh my God! Another thing lost in the pandemic.
always be pleasant. So we are selling 100% online this year.
Wow.
And we've actually sold more cookies this year than we did the previous year, because I think people just really wanted. I think people just really wanted to take advantage of click, 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 click.
We're eating more cookies too, as it turns
yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yes. No. We have sold approximately 15% more cookies this year, with a sales force that shrunk by 30%.
Wow.
So it's been pretty amazing.
Does each council have its own site?
Each troop now has its own site, and the
Holy cow!
the Girl Scouts. Well, girls have the options to do individual sites on their own, and then the troop itself has a site. So the sales get split among all of the girls. And this year, the Girl Scouts of Northern California introduced an option. They teamed up with so you could say finding Girl Scout cookies,
That's dangerous.
and they would tell you which troops near you were selling cookies and who you could contact to buy some. So
that was whoever thought that up deserves a bonus. That's a brilliant idea.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So yes, and the sales normally stop the first week of March, but because of the extraordinary circumstances of the past year, they're going to be going all the way through to the end of March.
So the Girl Scouts have definitely got this down. I went to their site. You can go to girlscoutcookies.org, which is their cookie finder. You can ask a Girl Scout to share a link to her virtual cookie booth. You can text cookies to 59618. You could download the Girl Scout Cookie Finder app. But my favorite is, hey, Echo, where can I get Girl Scout cookies near me? I love that. Brilliant. Well, I'm glad it's going well, because I know that's an important.
The best type of online cookies going.
Where do you have Girl Scout cookies in the UK?
They'd be Girl Guides, right?
No.
Yeah, they don't really exist in the same way. We only have Google cookies, and those are going away too. So.
Oh, that's another story we'll be getting to. Well done. Actually,
I've been doing this a while, Leo.
I think you have. Yeah, you're very good at this. That's Will Harris. It's great to have Will here. His new business is Entail, ENTALE.com. And I just downloaded the Entail player on my iPhone. I can't wait to try it and start listening to shows with all that additional material. That's going to be cool. Our show today brought to you by Extra Hop. First, there was SolarWinds, the sunburst attack. a real wake-up call to a changing threat landscape. Then on Tuesday, Microsoft announced 4 0 days attacking Exchange Server. In fact, Microsoft is now admitting that about 30,000 organizations were hacked by, according to Brian Krebs, a particularly aggressive Chinese espionage agency. But the worst thing you can imagine, and unfortunately, this may be the circumstance you're in, is an advanced threat actor who's already inside the network and has been sitting there for a long time. When criminals get past your defenses, businesses need a plan for detection and response. That old model of protection and prevention alone is no longer enough. They're inside the house. Fortunately, there's Extra Hop Reveal X. It's the only solution that shows you not just where intruders are going, but where they've been, so you can investigate incidents and prevent them from turning into full-blown breaches. When cyber attacks make the news, the first question security teams need to answer is, have we been compromised? Right now, there are a lot of people running Exchange servers who are dying to know. And actually, I think Krebs said, the chances are if you were running an Exchange server and you didn't get patched on Tuesday, you are compromised. Now you need Extra Hop Reveal X. It makes it super simple to find out if you've been compromised. 90 days of record look back and complete network visibility across the data center, but also through the cloud and all the way to the device edge, which lets your security team get to real answers fast. In a post-compromise world, your greatest chance at stopping advanced threats is with Extra Hop Network Detection and Response, NDR. Extra Hop is an amazing tool. I want you to go to the website. There's an interactive demo. Then you can see what Extra Hop looks like. You know, part of the reason it looks so good is because you'll be able to respond faster if you can grok the information faster, and that's exactly what Extra Hop does. extrahop.com/twit. Stop advanced threats. Take a look at the amazing interactive demo and find out how Extra Hop stops breaches 84% faster and helps you figure out who's inside the house. extrahop.com/twit. We thank Extra Hop so much for supporting This Week in Tech. We thank you for supporting it by going to that site, extrahop.com/twit. We should talk about this Microsoft 0 day. What terrible news. I'm sure, Lisa, your day was kind of busy on Tuesday covering this.
It was also, it landed during Microsoft Ignite.
Yeah, nice timing, huh?
They do that too. And it wasn't surprising. Honestly, nothing would be surprising with this threat landscape at all. But
So Brian Krebs had a good article in which he said his sources said that there were 30,000 organizations compromised. That's not people.
Oh no, it's 60,000. It's up to 60,000.
It's up to 60. Holy cow. 4 0-day flaws in Exchange server running from 2013 through 2019. Microsoft credit researchers at Velexity. Velexity's president, Stephen Adair, said, these flaws are very easy to exploit. You don't need any special knowledge. You just show up and say, I would like to break in and read all their email. That's all there is to it. Microsoft says it's a Chinese espionage group that's been dubbed Hafnium. And Krebs says, very aggressive.
Yeah. I mean, initially they went for high-value targets, as they call them, governments or financial institutions, and then the hack widened considerably.
Wow.
And it just appears at this point it's a matter of we can get in, so we will, and we'll get the data, and we'll see if it's useful later.
It doesn't look like cyber warfare. It's not the hacking where you're trying to make money by ransomware or malware or by stealing secrets. It's not the hack where you're trying to, cyber warfare hack the nation state might try to bring down a grid. It really looks like kind of dog food espionage, like just getting in, let's find out what's going on and maybe we can use it, that kind of thing.
Well, there's two ways in which this hack is super useful. And the first is, yes, it was an information gathering expedition. It was a great way to figure out what works and how and what the scale and scope is. So they now know a whole lot more about the US, about the global digital landscape than they did before they successfully hacked it. And the second way it's useful is it's wearing down the resources and the energy and the attention that people who fight hacking are going to have, because we've had so many major breaches.
Still busy trying to figure out if solar winds hit you. Now all of a sudden your exchange. Here's a Krebs quotes one source. It's police departments, hospitals, tons of city and state governments and credit unions. This is the quote that scares the hell out of me. About everyone who's running self-hosted Outlook web access and didn't get patched on Tuesday has been hit with a 0-day attack. And the chances are, what they do is they put a little web server on your system, and the chances are it's there. Yeah.
And you can't just run the patch. The thing is you're going to have to go through.
You're compromised.
Well, not just that, but even if you were to patch it now, you're going to have to go through and rebuild your system from the ground up, because you just don't know what got injected. You don't know what's logging what, and you don't know what other vulnerabilities you have. And the thing that honestly scares me a little bit more is they've automated the attacks. This is not just a bank of people who are, looking cool and cackling and I'm into the system. Like, they've written bots that can now just that can now perpetuate these huge attacks on a scale that we haven't seen before. And again, this is if you're on the side, we're like, oh, this is interesting. It's a great way to wear down someone's defenses over time, because even if you find and block or find and stop these bugs, it's like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park. They're just testing the fence for weakness, and sooner or later they're going to find a spot that the fence only going to hold for so long.
Right. I mean, also being able to build the interconnections for spear phishing is really useful. So if you have all that data, you now know how people are interrelated to each other.
Oh, that's a good point.
And so when you, so now it's why, like, when people at school send me emails to all the parents without a blind CC, you get this email back from me like, hey, that wouldn't be a good idea. That we should avoid that.
Oh my God, yeah.
That is because that connection now is made. So now someone can go, hey, this is Judy from the school, and so now they're because almost all hacking is really not
social
all of
hacking,
it, but it's all social hacking. It's
a lot of it is.
It's all organic, organic firewall failure, and so that you knowing how people are interrelated and knowing what they think is okay and what they and coming to them from something that seems familiar is a big piece of how this gets how you get into a company later. And you may not know what that is, but 30,000 millions of people and knowing how they're interrelated is a treasure trove doing that. Yeah.
Wow.
The other thing I'd like to point out with this is Microsoft's messaging upfront was they've had a couple good points, not a couple good points, but that seems like editorializing. I'm not trying to editorialize here. They've had a couple they've tried to stick with a just a facts approach, which is refreshing because they're not obfuscating too much on it. But one of the things I do think is notable is they're very much in the, oh, by the way, if you have any of our cloud-based services, you're absolutely not affected. And I was like, you got to respect the hustle.
Got to get the sales pitch in there.
Yes,
Gee, if you were only running Microsoft 365,
this wouldn't be a problem.
You'd be home by now.
But one of the things this does point out that I don't think a lot of people in the U.S. really think about is a lot of our infrastructure, everything from transit to utilities to hospitals to, like you said, local governments to school districts. All of those places have tiny IT budgets, comparatively speaking, and they don't have a whole lot of money to be perpetually upgrading to the latest or greatest things. And so a lot of our country is running on systems that are not updated as often as vendors would recommend and do not enjoy the level of technical support that would seem prudent. We're looking at a real tech infrastructure issue here in terms of funding and deployment. So for all that this is a Microsoft bug, this is also, a tech funding issue.
I think your social graph point is really interesting, Alex. But, it makes me think one of the complaints people had about Clubhouse was it was unusually aggressive at going through your contacts. In fact, come to think of it, that's one of the complaints people have about almost all of these apps, they immediately ask for access to your contact list. We just want to let you know when somebody you know is on Clubhouse or is joining Clubhouse. We just want to, it's for you. But remember, the Clubhouse's back end is a Chinese company. I would guess that by now,
and those
our adversaries have a full social graph of every single human on the planet.
Well, it's the issue. You're right. The issue that emails provide is context. So you know how people are connected, but you also know the discussions that they're having. So you can reply to someone based on another conversation, literally referring back to something that is going to look familiar to them.
The only saving grace is if they've hacked 60,000 organizations, they must have millions of emails. It's like a giant data dump. I'm hoping that they can't handle it all, or I don't know. Do they?
No, they can handle it all.
They can handle it?
That's not hard.
It's a little AI here.
Because they don't need all of it. They don't need all of it. Because everyone's doing it in text, it's super convenient. And so it's we were a target of state actors last year, so we just got a lot of education in this area because we just have to be careful of everything. We would send each other, people test emails and so on and so forth. So the thing is that you have to be careful because all that contextual stuff, someone's going to insert information into they're going to insert information that you're familiar with. They know that you're there, and you're much more likely to click on something because that's from
the boss.
And it's not just that it's from the boss, that it's said in the right language with the right context with the right. There's no reason for you to look at it and go, well, that isn't correct, and then you click on it and then you're done, and so that's and then it's in and so that's the. It's an enormous amount of information. I mean, and extremely valuable information. Again, to do the social hacking that's required to do the real hacking.
Is it time to give up? Surrender, Dorothy? I mean, what do we do about this?
Stop using email.
Stop using email.
Do everything on a Zoom call. Never mind the Zoom fatigue.
Zoom's end-to-end encrypted. It's all safe.
No, I feel like we should just go to TikTok.
I think it's all about TikTok.
TikTok's
we just do the whole.
Communicate everything in 40-second sound bites with a soundtrack.
Exactly. No, I think that there's not, in some cases, there's not a lot we can do, but I mean, definitely we shift over to more secure.
Do you use Signal or something like that?
Yeah, I use Signal a lot.
Okay. So there you go. I mean, you might still get the metadata. Well, I guess you wouldn't get metadata even from Signal.
Yeah, it's not, nothing's perfect. I mean, you have to know that, everything is, everything's to some level at risk. I mean, there's no perfectly safe thing. So you just have to. Most people aren't hacked because they're not interesting. So
that's the good news. That's the good news. I always tell my radio audience that is, you hear about all this stuff, but don't worry, nobody's interested in you.
Well, the key is to be the key that we have to keep on thinking about is that there is nothing protected online, and so being interesting, and then also you just really want to be careful of what you do online, and never think that you're safe. Like you should just assume that anything you're doing online is going to could be put out into the public.
We did a panel with Bruce Schneier, and we had Brian Chi, and we had. Actually, it was a red team, blue team exercise where Chibert and Father Robert Balassier were the bad guys, the red team, the hackers, and then we had Bruce Schneier and Jerry Buchelt, the CISO at LogMeIn, as the defenders. And it was really interesting to hear these two groups who are very well schooled in the methodology and so forth basically say there's nothing you can do, and you just do the best you can. You have layered security, but you pretty much assume that you're under attack all the time, and you may even be compromised. It sounds awful, to be honest with you. Is encryption a solution?
It's part of it.
Yeah.
Definitely, encrypting what needs to be.
Being paranoid. You should just assume that the emails that you're getting are adversarial until proven otherwise. That's the zero trust architecture that Google uses and others promote. The idea, just assume everything's hostile until proven otherwise.
Yeah, don't plug your USB devices into things at the airport.
Put super glue in all those USB devices.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, people do that though. That's the thing. Fortunately, the people who do that probably are not a target.
They aren't, but again, it's whether you provide ancillary information back that would allow you to. I mean, so it's that it gets back into why everyone wears masks, even though people are getting vaccines. It's a matter of if everyone is more careful, it slows down the effectiveness of it. It doesn't mean that anything will stop it, but it does mean that you are going to slow the propagation.
Oh, gosh. This is the kind of topic I hate. Let me find something more cheery. Oh, how about this? Grimes made $5 million in under 20 minutes selling crypto-based artwork. We've been talking a lot about NFTs. In fact, my friend Trey Ratcliffe, the photographer, is going to join This Week in Google on Wednesday because he's selling some of his works via NFTs. He even gave me one. And I thought I'd have him explain what's going on with this. We also covered it on Thursday.
Even better is as well as Grimes selling $5.8 million. I think Jack Dorsey just put his first ever tweet up and is at something like $3 million already.
Yeah, that's crazy.
By the NFT of Jack Dorsey's first tweet.
So his first tweet, which is something like setting up Twitter, TWTTR, which is what it was called in those days, is still online at Twitter. You can read it. It doesn't take it off and give it to you. Can you explain this? You're hip and with it, Mr. Will Harris. What the hell? That's my question. What the hell? I 100% cannot explain this.
But as far as I'm aware, I've seen some incredible stuff go. The original GIF of the Nyan cat, I think, went for $600,000 in Ethereum.
Now, clearly the people who are spending this money, they're not getting anything. You can print a copy of Jack Dorsey's tweet. Anybody can, or of the Neon Cat, or even of Grimes' artwork. It's digital, so it's perfectly copyable. You can have a copy of it. That's not what they're getting. They're getting a certificate signed by the original author that says...
Well, you're sort of saying that you own that thing.
You own it.
You are actually owning...
But really what they're buying is speculative. They're assuming that whatever this thing is, this blockchain entry I have I will be able to sell for a higher price down the road, right? Because there's no pride of ownership. I'm not hanging it on the wall.
Well, you might do. You might hang it on. You might print out Jack Dorsey's tweet and say, like, I own this tweet, and sure, I can print it a bunch of times, but I can literally prove that I own it. And it's this really interesting shift. In a way, it's kind of like the inverse of what we've seen across the rest of media, which is, when you subscribe to Spotify or when you subscribe to Apple Music, or even if you buy tracks from Apple, right, you never actually get to own those tracks. You only ever have, it's like that thing of what happens to my iTunes account when I die. Nobody can inherit my music in the way that they can inherit my CDs. So in a way, what people are doing now with NFTs is flipping that on its head and saying, yeah, okay, the thing might be infinitely copyable because it's digital, but actually you can own the actual thing and pass it on. And I think that links into, I think the NFT piece from Jack Dorsey at Twitter links really neatly into the fact that Square this week announced that it was buying Tidal,
right?
The Jay-Z
and Beyonce's music, music,
which looks like a really, really, really weird thing for a payments processor to do, until you think, okay, well, how are artists going to make money in the future when touring is restricted and streaming royalties are minor?
They're looking at Patreon and saying we could be the Patreon for the music industry.
Well, look, Grimes has just sold $6 million worth of art. What if you're, any band in the world can sell, the copy of a track or the copy, you can sell your actual music. And so I think, I think that the whole Square Tidal thing is a whole play for an extension of music beyond what we think of music being right now.
The NBA has sold $200 million worth of highlights.
Yeah. The top cards.
Top shot, yeah.
And I think that the other thing is there's limited editions. It doesn't have to be, you could theoretically not have it be the only one that you're selling. That's for $5 million or whatever. But what if you're able to, sell a limited edition album, for Tidal, where people have the limited edition. It might be a collector's item. There's only 1,500 printed or 1,000 or printed, quote unquote, digitally printed. If you, and I'm not a collector, so it's not really something that sinks into me. I barely keep the stuff I should keep, let alone stuff that doesn't have any.
I don't think these people are collectors.
Value,
I think they're speculators. I think it's
well, it gets into art though, right? Because you can buy the original of a Damien Hirst for, you know, say £500,000. Right. You can buy a limited edition print of a Damien Hirst signed by Damien Hirst for, say, £10,000. I could take a photo of a Damien Hirst in a gallery for nothing, but and
you can get a poster of the Mona Lisa. You can get a poster of the Mona Lisa, you know, for X amount of money and put it on your wall, and you have most of the experience, you know, of having it.
But there is a value of saying when somebody comes in your house, that's the real Mona Lisa.
So I think what we're seeing in the digital age is in the digital age is like, okay, we're starting to experiment with what does real digital ownership look like. Like, as Alex says, you can buy as many posters of the Mona Lisa as you want. There's value in having the actual one. Well, what if, you know, I can listen to as many Grimes songs as I want, but I own the original master? You know,
but you don't. You don't own that's not what's being sold. It's not the master.
Mm-hmm.
It's this kind of intangible thing that I own the NFT. It's not. It's very odd, right. And I think it's purely speculative. Seth Godin makes a very good point in his blog. He says NFTs are a dangerous trap. Like most traps, they're mysterious, then appealing, and then it's too late. And his argument is not that it's silly or it's foolish, but because it's based on blockchain, it is a horrendous and really kind of, at this point, given climate change, untenable use of energy for absolutely nothing.
Well, that's only if you argue that art is nothing. And I think
he
that's
says
a pretty
the rest of us are going to pay for
a guy that's
but you're not. No, the art was made. The art's independent of the NFT. He says the rest of us are going to pay for NFTs for a very long time. They use an astonishing amount. This is the NFT, not the artwork. An astonishing amount of electricity to create and to trade. Together, they're already using more than is consumed by some states in the United States. Imagine building a giant new power plant just to make Christie's or the Basel Art Fair function. And the amount of power wasted will go up commensurate with their popularity and value because that's how it's designed. The short version is that for the foreseeable future, the method that's used to verify the blockchain and to create new digital coins is deliberately energy intensive and inefficient. It's on purpose. The energy use will go up and not down. And that's, I have to say, he's got a very good point. Societally, I don't know if, you know, this is such a great idea.
But then you're making a point against blockchain, right? You might as well say
it is. Bitcoin is
crypto and
it's equally
it's
dumb.
all completely unethical. It's like, well, you know, how much do we spend printing money that ends up in people's, you know, pockets and just running around doing nothing?
But once a dollar bill is printed, it takes no more money. But when every single time a Bitcoin is exchanged, it requires a significant amount of energy to record that in the blockchain.
Well,
for no good reason.
Better get that Green New Deal passed pretty quickly, then, guys.
There's a couple other things. One is that's assuming that energy is going to be a constrained resource forever, which it probably won't be.
Well, that's the only potential positive outcome of this is we'll be required to figure out a solution to the energy problem so that we can get renewable energy into the system as quickly as possible.
Well, I think that we're moving that. I mean, we're moving that direction at an incredible pace. I mean, given the level of infrastructure required,
might accelerate it. Yeah,
it could. But I think that, and I think that, I mean, right now I can't get my head around it. I mean, I'm with everybody else. Like, I don't understand why I would pay money for that. But it feels absurd at the moment. I know that we're going to come back to this episode a year from now and be like, I can't believe we said that. But like, this was of course the future, but I can't see it because I don't. But of course I don't. I would never buy a painting.
It feels like the early days of Bitcoin. It feels like the early days of Bitcoin where you're trying to explain to someone what Bitcoin is and what it represents and why it exists, and nobody can really do it apart from like any sort of money. Everybody's agreed that it's got a value and maybe you can do something with it. And I think in a year's time, we'll be looking back at NFTs in the same way that we look at Bitcoin, you know, from 5 years ago and go, oh, yeah, of course, that's going to mean something. But we just can't quite see it yet.
I mean, I think people are definitely grappling with how do we, since, you know, we are moving towards a society that is going to buy less things. buy less physical things. So while we're talking about the energy impact of NFT or all these other things, we are going to buy less things. We're buying more things we're spending more of our flexible income on things that are on our phones, that are media, that are, all that money's going to things that are intangible. And so I think that there is that's already kind of happening. The interesting thing is that then you have artists and people making things got to figure out how you get into that market. Like, how do I become part of that market if I, and
well, to some degree, the fine art
games
market has always been a little bit of a scam, right? I mean, what makes a Basquiat
all a conversation
worth $100 million?
It's all social connections and
I mean, the value of everything that's 30 or 40% more than the hard goods is a conversation. Like it's anything over that is just because we have some perceived value because of some kind of story. So whether it's the kind of car the kind of car we buy or the dinner we go out to, or all of those things are perceived value based on a conversation. And so it's the dollar, the US dollar is just a conversation. It's not based on
I agree.
anything.
And
It's
a lot of people, and I think back to the generational thing, a lot of younger people are used to buying stuff that is completely intangible. They've grown up in one of the things that that Seth Godin actually notes in his blog is that it's as pointless as Pokemon cards, and it's like, well, sorry, we all grew up buying. Some of us grew up buying Pokemon cards, and they're still worth a crap ton of money.
Tell my kid that.
My daughter,
and so
my daughter spends my daughter spends most of her money on Roblox.
Way to tell me,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Roblox is even less tangible. It's not even physical.
Because when you're buying Pokemon cards, or you're buying things in Animal Crossing or any one of the other games, you're not buying something so much as you're basically paying for the idea of the experience you're having, or you're paying for the satisfaction of finishing collection or things like that. Like, there's a whole constellation of meaning around any purchase, and this NFT stuff just comes back to.
You can argue that every time you put down $20 at a blackjack table, you're paying for an experience. The chance that you might win some money, but
that's all gambling is you're basically paying for an experience, and if you make money, hooray, it's a nice side effect. But no one spends money on gambling because they expect to win, or I should say, nobody reasonable does.
They call that an addiction.
Exactly, yeah. But like, to go back to the generation thing. If you're growing up as somebody where your social life is in computer-mediated environments, and you've been gaming, and you're used to being able to customize your environment, and it's cheaper and easier than customizing your physical space, like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you concentrate the bulk of your economic activity there?
Right.
Yeah, I think
absolutely. And I have to say, I have three godchildren who I guess are under the age of 13. And for Christmas, the oldest one wanted Minecraft bucks. The middle one wanted Roblox bucks, and the other one wanted V-Bucks.
Right.
And you're like, that's, it's all about buying intangible things. So I think we're on a giant path towards everything. Everything is more intangible, and we're all going to be extinct before we get it.
In a couple of years, Uncle Will can show them how to Zoom date, and the circle of life will be complete. Our show today brought to you by ZipRecruiter. I hope you're hiring. I think the world is coming back. The job market is improving. We had job growth this last quarter. If you're one of those people doing hiring, hey, thank you. Bully for you. And I want to tell you about the best way to hire. It's ZipRecruiter. Back in the day when we hired, we used to use ZipRecruiter and loved it. Finding great candidates is tough, but I would argue it's the most important thing you do in a business. A business, a company, a corporation it's made up of the people who work there. And a great employee can take you to the moon, and a bad employee can drag you right down. You could post that opening on a job board and then hope the right person comes along. Or you could go to ZipRecruiter. Try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/twit. Immediately, when you post that job on ZipRecruiter, it gets sent out to over 100 top job sites. Just one click of the mouse. So you're casting a broader net. But it doesn't stop there. ZipRecruiter's matching technology finds people with the right skills and experience for your job then actively invites them to apply. So while other services may overwhelm you with applications to sift through, ZipRecruiter actually finds what you're looking for, the needle in the haystack, and makes it easy to scan, rate, rank, and hire the right person. So effective that 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. It took us just hours when we used it. It was almost shocking to see these candidates start rolling in. Right now, you can try ZipRecruiter free at ZipRecruiter.com/twit. If you're hiring, God bless you. Thank you. And you might as well do it the right way, the easy way. ZipRecruiter.com/TWIT. ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. ZipRecruiter.com/twit. Thank you, ZipRecruiter, for supporting This Week in Tech. Thank you for supporting us, dear listener, by using that special URL. By the way, we're going to be selling NFTs for all my ad reads at the end of the show, so line up.
Right.
Doesn't it? Don't you feel like, gosh, I wish I could figure out a way to capitalize on this? I mean, it just seems hit or miss. It seems weird. I don't get it. One thing you won't be buying, Will, is a 27-inch iMac, right?
Or at least the Pro one, right?
iMac Pro. Yeah, I have one on my desk. Apple has confirmed it's been discontinued. When supplies run out, they're going to stop selling it. Now, there are two ways to look at that. One is, in fact, they're pointing people to the latest 27-inch iMac, that the non-Pro iMacs are so good you don't need an iMac Pro. I choose to interpret it that Apple's going to do a M1 or M something version of the iMac Pro sooner than later. You think, Alex?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that. I think that Apple's in the M series chips and the entire infrastructure is so advanced that there is not any reason for them. I think that they just need to. I mean, they're obviously going to have to decide how they're turning all these things down in that process, but they're no longer trying to kind of clump together this kind of hodgepodge of hardware that to make it as good as they can. I think that there's going to be something that has a screen. Probably next iMac will most likely just be way more powerful than the iMac Pro whenever that comes out. Yeah. Whether it's,
I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? That you might be getting on a Mac Mini that's more powerful than the $6,000 iMac Pro that I bought a couple of years ago.
We have a bunch of Mac Minis and they are just screaming.
Yeah,
like the M1s, they're just so fast. You just can't believe what you bought.
I'm starting to think an all-in-one is not a good idea. Because one of the problems I have with my iMac Pro is that I'm stuck with that screen, which is fine. It was fine in 2017. It's a very good screen. But there are other form factors I'd like to look at. I'd like to look at a 59-inch curved widescreen, perhaps.
Well, that's why we invest in the Mac Minis, is because you have so much capability in them, and we can put any kind of monitors or any sets of at least 2 monitors easily, 6 if you get really creative. But you. It makes it really, really easy. That said, I really do like the fact that I can just pick up a whole computer and set it somewhere or hang it somewhere, and it's just the whole thing is all there, and I don't have to figure out how I'm going to wire it all together. So I think that there's an advantage to having a screen that has a computer in it as well.
Not if it's a long-term hold.
I mean,
for you, yes.
There's definitely something, the all-in-one form factor that Apple has now pioneered for years, since the original iMac.
Wow.
Yeah. Is is clearly incredibly convenient, but it's definitely got a usage cap, right? So one of the things that I notice, particularly where I work, where we're in a shared working space where everybody's a startup, there's not a single there's not a single desktop computer in the building, because everybody has a 27-inch 4K monitor on their desk and an Apple laptop. I mean, also nobody has Windows laptops, but you have a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro and a monitor and a keyboard, and you pick it up and take it between wherever you want. And that is sort of the ultimate all-in-one form factor. And I think what a lot of pros are looking for is not an iMac Pro with an M1. It's the mega MacBook Pro with an M1. I've got the 16-inch MacBook Pro at the moment, and it's it's such a beautiful and fantastic machine, but with an M1 in it, it would just be like unstoppable. So that's what I'm holding out hope for. I'm hoping this year. Alex, am I going to get one this year?
I have no idea. I have no idea when I think our chances are pretty good. I think our chances are pretty good for the MacBook Pros. I mean, I think that we're probably not going to see the Mac Pros until next year, but I think that the other machines most likely by the end of the year. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't have any. The interesting thing will be to see where they take the chips. Is it going to be a M1X or M2 or those types of things? And because some of the rumors are the bigger chips have a lot of cores.
I just want to know if I'm going to need new wheels for an M1 computer. How much do I have to pay for extra M2 wheels?
Yeah, exactly. I think.
I want a Mac Mini. And I bet you do too, Alex. I want a beefed up Mac Mini. The one they're selling is great, but I'd like one with more RAM, more power, more processors, more connectivity.
I think the way I use Mac Minis, because I use them so much as glue, that they're like, it's fine. Like it does what it needs to do. It's really fast. I have a whole bunch of the 8 gig ones because we use them for camera controllers for our remote kits. Mm-hmm. So I have so I put on Resolve to see what they would do. I didn't really expect.
They're really appliances for you.
Yeah, I mean, we just use them as little, because we use the smaller version of that as like the B-Link, these little PCs that we use that are like tiny, like these little boxes. And so like we have lots of little glue that we use to tie things together. And in their space, the M1s are really, they're really powerful. And I think that the difference between 16 and 18, because 8 and 16, for the kind of thing I do doesn't really mean anything to me because I'm not really using them for that heavy horsepower.
Right.
But I think that I am interested to see if they upgrade those at some point to a 32 gig, Mac Mini when they release the bigger ones or whatever. That form factor, as long as it stays in the 1U form factor, or because we can put 2 of those in a rack. That's kind of what we look at. Is we take the 2 Mac Minis and they fit into a rack. And Sonnet makes these enclosures and you put them in there and stick it through. And so those are the kind of things that we worry about.
Here's my speculation on this discontinuation of their $5,000. That's the starting point. iMac Pro, which I have again on my desk with a Xeon W processor and 64 gigs of RAM and all. This thing is a beast. Mm-hmm. Is they don't want to sell this and be embarrassed when the benchmarks come out for the next MacBook Pro and it's 10 times faster.
Even if you're not gonna like, they're signaling to everyone that this is what you're gonna get, and if it comes out this fall or whatever, that what they don't want. I mean, they don't need the money. I mean, they don't. Apple doesn't need the money,
but they like
for the
money.
iMac sales. They like it. But I mean, the thing is, what I mean, they're at this point they're spending most of their money giving it back to investors. And so the thing is that the iMac sales are such a small part of their. I mean, it's just like a tiny little sliver of income that they can afford to just do it from a point of view of we don't want people to be upset that they bought something that I think it does signal to us that they think that the next iMac will be considerably faster than the iMac Pro is today.
Yeah. I think
that's a pretty good signal that they don't want you to keep buying that thinking it's a Pro and spending a ton of money when one's going to come out for $3,000 that is screaming like 10 times faster or 5 times faster or whatever.
That would be so I mean, according to everywhere that according to The Verge, actually, it looks like Mac sales in total, so all Macs, including laptops, were just under 10% of Apple's revenue, it looks like, in 2020.
Wow.
So,
and that was up. By the way, that was up a lot from the year before. So,
well, and also that's the vast majority of those are portable.
Right.
Like the vast majority of the sales are Mac are laptops.
Okay. Just trying to get some hopeful news in here. Bad news, according to the MIT Tech. Why are you laughing?
I want some hopeful news.
I just want some upbeat stuff, but all I got is stuff like this. According to the MIT Technology Review, Apple's walled garden actually is bad for security. Yes, it makes it hard to get in, but once you're in, it makes it really hard for security researchers to find out who's in there and what they're doing. The lockdown system can backfire because security researchers have no idea what's going on.
Well, that links really interestingly as well to the you can call this good news or bad news depending on your point of view. The fact that my home gaff in the UK has just opened up an antitrust probe into the fact that the App Store is a completely closed, walled garden, and you can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Which is going to be a big thing over here. The UK has now announced antitrust probes into competition for both Google and Apple in the last 6 months now. So definitely lots to examine. There's an interesting two different ways of looking at it. So as a percentage of all devices sold, I think iPhones were 16% of all mobile devices sold last year. So it's really easy to walk to a competition regulator and say, well, actually,
we're not a monopoly.
There's no competition problem here. We're at 15%. Hey, you want an open app store? There's 84% of all the devices in the world you can go and have an open app store on. But of course, they are the app store for 100% of Apple devices.
Right.
So that starts to look like a bit of a monopoly.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's going to be in the United States, it doesn't have a chance, but in the, it will never go anywhere. But in the UK and the EU, it might, and because they have a much different set of rules that are, the United States, if you don't, separating the iPhone from phones is going to be very hard in the United States. They look the same. They largely operate the same. It's going to be hard to get a Octarian to think that they're two different things. And so I think that that's going to be the real challenge in the US, but I do think that Apple's biggest market risk for the next decade is antitrust, because they're pulling away. Like, they're just pulling away in a stunning fashion. I mean, if you look at the M1, if you look at while the store is a minority and this is where people will start pushing back, is that the store is a very small minority of all the sales, but it's a huge majority of all the purchases. All the money spent is in the store, and so it has a different impact there. But in all areas, Apple seems to be running at all cylinders. And they have they're moving ahead like you would as a startup, but they have the size of one of the largest companies in the world, and that's eventually going to catch up with them. It's going to be a problem. Of course, you got to look at point.
You got to look at the fact that it was there is as well as the UK antitrust probe, which kicked off this week. There is an existing EU antitrust probe, which kicked off last year, and you've got to look back at the history of you've got to look at the Microsoft precedent and say, look, how hard was it to say, you can install any internet browser on a Microsoft computer, but the web browser is inextricably linked to the Microsoft experience. Well, the EU didn't mind sort of ripping that out whenever that was, 20 years ago. So you've got to wonder if and that leave the door open for everybody else to come in. So you've got to wonder if we're going to be repeating itself.
Margrethe Vestager is the chief. She's been the EU's chief enforcer and the person who's been crafting a lot of the antitrust suits, especially with Google. And I believe she's already been successful in uncoupling Google and the Google search engine from Google Chrome by arguing that you can't have those two inextricably linked. It was a ruling that was very, very similar to arguing that you had to uncouple Internet Explorer from Microsoft Windows. So
looks like the U.S. is going to be getting its own kind of Margrethe Vestager, because Tim Wu, who is a leading critic of big tech, has now been invited to join the National Economic Council, where he will serve as President Biden's special assistant for technology and competition policy. Wu's probably pretty well known to many of our audience members. He wrote The Kill Switch, and his last book was The Curse of Bigness. Antitrust in the New Gilded Age. It is widely thought that this is a signal from the White House that they're going to take antitrust actions very seriously. Wu has not only been an antitrust advocate, he's actually advocated the breakup of both Google and Facebook. Yeah. So I think if I'm in the headquarters at Google or Facebook or Amazon, I'd be a little bit nervous about this move.
This has been coming for years, though.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, this has been coming for years, though, because the last 18 months in Congress, you've had these CEOs repeatedly called up before Congress to explain everything from how they collect data to what kind of speech they allow on their platforms to are they or are they not concerned that are you concerned that you're too big for the market, which, you know, no CEO in their right mind is going to say, yeah, I really do think about that a lot. And there has been a narrative developing in Washington that has been, you know, aided and abetted by books like Tim Wu's, which is a good book. I've read the book. And the narrative that is being shaped is along the lines of we love the tech companies because they've been the engine of the engines for the U.S. stock markets. People get rich off the tech companies, but what have the trade-offs been, and are these tech companies actually making people's lives worse in ways that translate to their bottom line, to their paycheck? And there is a growing body of evidence that says yes, these tech companies do act in ways that can significantly affect how people make money. And you're going to have enough Congress people who are like, yes, this is a populist cause. Let's go for it.
I think that for Facebook and Google, it's more challenging. I think that, it's more challenging for Facebook and Google. For Apple, I think the problem is that Apple now is essentially pushing money back to its shareholders. And those shareholders are not just, you know, Warren Buffett. These are
a lot of members of Congress, probably.
Well, not only that, it's an awful lot of my uncle-in-law has, like, I don't know how many shares of Apple that he bought in the late 90s.
Right.
You know, and so
it's everybody's 401ks.
Yeah, and so,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so and their 401ks and all the Apple employees that are in the you know, stock distribution, and there's millions and millions of people that are affected by that. And you know, if things start to become something more tense, I mean, because Apple is literally putting, it's not that oh, you're riding that stock. Apple is actively giving out dividends and hundreds of billions of dollars back to their shareholders. So they really more than probably any company in the history of the world represent their stockholders. You know, like that they're pushing money out away because they already have enough cash. You know, and so that's a big reason that a company does that is employee retention. You got to keep that stock.
You increase the value of your stock.
Yeah,
because you're buying it back, it increases the value of each share.
So it's going to be tricky. I mean, it may seem like a popular thing until they start doing it, and then I think there's going to be a lot of people that are sending emails. I think
Facebook is going to be your sacrificial lamb in this one.
Wu is clearly anti-Facebook.
It's going to be super easy to blame. It's going to be super easy to set up Facebook as a company that's being run for the 1%, or a company that's not being held accountable, or a company that goes against American values, and to make the case that when you have Facebook and Instagram, that will constitute some sort of social media ecosystem that has to be broken down.
Exactly right. Lisa, you're exactly right, because the reason Facebook looks like the easiest sacrificial lamb is because it's literally the easiest to break up. Like, if you look at Apple, you go, well, what am I going to take? Am I going to stop them selling iPhones and computers, or am I going to stop them selling apps on the phone? If you look at Google, you go, okay, well, maybe I can try and make Chrome not the default thing, but actually if you stop Google search being the default, you kill Firefox, and then, you know, that kills competition in that market. Whereas actually, if you look at Facebook, you just go, oh, Facebook is Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. Oh, they were three companies. Let's just make them three companies again. And it looks like a really easy way to break up something enormous.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I'd like to see them try, in all honesty, is Amazon.
Yeah. So here's an interesting data point. Wu was in the Obama administration and in the antitrust era. And he says perhaps we were too lenient on these big companies.
Oh yeah,
which means maybe he wants a do-over now, and maybe they shouldn't have been so welcoming of these mergers. I do feel with you, Lisa, that Amazon is perhaps the one you most want to break up, but I think it's a lot harder because so many of us are fans, right? We use it nonstop. Maybe not fans. Biden, it was interesting. I thought actually encouraged the unionization efforts in Alabama for Facebook workers. I'm sorry.
Well, the thing I find interesting about Amazon is Amazon Web Services is the economic engine for that company.
Yeah. And everything
And-
runs on it. Go ahead and try to.
Yeah, it's the economic engine for everybody.
For the work, for
It's
the
not just-
customers.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
it is.
I mean-
it's clearly it has such a first to market advantage in the clouds. I was compiling I was trying to compile a table recently to gauge the relative economic impact and customer base for the major cloud services providers in the US. And Amazon is just so far ahead of everybody else because they were first and they defined the market.
Do you think that's why
And-
Bezos left? He wanted to get out before the stuff hits the fan.
Before somebody has to start thinking about, okay, how do I maintain this
Yeah.
crazy growth?
Yeah.
And how do I make sure that my company doesn't get split
course,
up into a retail
The
arm,
new
an
CEO
entertainment
is
arm,
the
and a
former
services
CEO
arm?
Well, look,
of
there's-
AWS, so maybe this is
Yeah.
the guy who knows.
Yeah, I think
Cloud
there's
is like a fast
there's
track
a
to
really
CEO.
interesting argument around Amazon. So there's a couple of really interesting arguments around Amazon. One is Amazon could be the only company that increased in market value if you split it up. So if you took AWS out of Amazon as a business, it would be one of the top 10 NASDAQ companies on its own. And you go, actually, that could be a situation where like 1 + 1 actually equals 3, because I've suddenly got 2 mega growth businesses rather than one that's kind of being hidden within another. And then I think if you look at the case for Amazon antitrust in general, you've got 2 different ways of back to the framing question we came back to earlier, right? Which is it? So Amazon has about 40% of e-commerce, which obviously looks enormous, but about 10% of retail compared to Walmart, Costco, any other retailer in Britain, globally. So it's a case of like, well, which is it? Is it a 40% player or is it a 10% player? And then you go, well, actually, it owns something like 85% of book sales. You go, well, do I stop Amazon selling books, but let it sell everything else, like fashion, where it's got, almost no foothold whatsoever? So, where you would, Amazon can clearly be split into a retail and non-retail business, but how you regulate the retail part of the business looks really interesting, given the way that you frame it. It can be either enormous or tiny. And depending on what sector you're looking at, it's got completely different shares across all these different things.
Well, and also, we have to also acknowledge that some of the efficiencies that we have and some of the what we have here is because of the size, because of the efficiencies that are there in these large companies. They are going to get to a point where we need to do something about it. And so we're trying to figure that out. But we also have to get that part of what makes this work is that there aren't 1,000 players doing it 1,000 different ways. When we like the breakup of the bells didn't really help us very much. Like it seemed like it would. It just created chaos at a certain time, and now it's just AT&T and Verizon. All the baby bells are back into 2 big companies that are actually bigger as a group than they were before, and their success in that area has basically slowed down, retarded the entire growth of broadband and wireless and everything else was actually, damaged in a lot of ways. It's unclear that it would have happened in the same way had they been kind of a big oaf, kind of continuing to move through the 80s.
I'm sure Tim Wu would have something to say about that, because that's a lot of what the kill switch was about. And I would bet he thinks that the breakup of the baby bells was positive, but I don't. But I'd like to hear.
They're big companies, and they're doing a lot of obstruction. I mean, the reason that we have such bad internet in the United States is because of those 2 companies.
Yeah,
like let's be clear. Like
well,
Comcast.
throw in Comcast and
it's like pole access is the thing. And so that's the part that we just getting pole access, and we would.
As it turns out, Wu has an entire section in his book, The Curse of Bigness, on the baby bell.
Oh, and do you remember what his take was on that?
I've just
Go find. I'll tell you what. Let me take a break.
I'm searching for it on Kindle right now.
You can find that book and read us the salient passages.
Yes, please do.
That's Lisa Schmeiser. She is now senior editor at IT Pro Today. Great to have you, Lisa. Will Harris. His new company is Entail. It's a new podcast player with a very clever hook at entale.com. And of course, from Office Hours and 090 Media, Alex Lindsay. It's interesting that at least 2 of the 4 sponsors in the show today are security companies. I want to talk a little bit about Barracuda. That's a name everybody knows for enterprise security. Hackers are always looking, we were just talking about this, for the weakest link in your security configuration. And often that turns out to be your email security. It's funny. I've been talking about this for months. then all of a sudden, here's this 0 day in Outlook Web Access. Here's the thing. If you can find those vulnerabilities, you can defend against cyber attacks. That's why Barracuda has created a new tool they call the Threat Analyzer tool. From traditional malware to the latest spear phishing, account takeover, and conversation hijacking, Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats. And by the way, any one of them can take you down. It takes several different layers of security working together to protect you effectively against all 13 threat types. And if there's even one gap, the crooks are going to find out where you're vulnerable. It's literally what they spend their entire day on, and some of them nights too. When they find that gap in your security, they just need to choose the right type of threat, customize it, get it into your system. It can cost you millions of dollars, your reputation in the market. Here's where it gets hard. With hundreds of highly targeted personalized threat variants emerging daily, including those 0 days we saw this week, and many different kinds of on-prem and cloud-based email systems, it can be really challenging to identify your specific gaps or vulnerabilities. Don't just look over there and say, oh, those Exchange guys, wow, I'm glad that didn't happen to me. You're next. That's why you need the Barracuda Threat Analyzer. It's incredibly simple and fast to use. If you go to Barracuda, Barracuda, barracuda.com/twit. You answer a few simple multi-choice questions about your email security setup. It'll only take a couple of minutes. Barracuda's Threat Analyzer tool will provide a custom report telling you what threat types you're most vulnerable to, and I guarantee you it's been updated in the last couple of days. You'll get custom recommendations on how to strengthen your defenses against those attacks. It's free. It's easy to use. I think you really want to check this out. Turns out, and this is from December's Barracuda spear phishing report, 12% of all spear phishing attacks are business email compromise, and that's going up dramatically. That's almost doubled since 2019. And that shows you these attacks work. That's why they're being more and more happening. According to the FBI's most recent internet crime report, business email compromise led to over $3.5 billion in losses last year. As an example, government of Puerto Rico lost $2.6 million in a single attack. You might remember Shark Tank's Barbara Corcoran. This is a really common attack. Her employees fell for an impersonation attack. They got a fake invoice and paid it, wiring a $400,000 out to the bad guys. They realized what they'd done in time. They got the money back. I wish I could say the same for a school district in Texas, which made fraudulent payments over a period of weeks, losing $2.3 million before the attack was discovered. Money they'll never get back. Don't let this happen to you. If your email security is not protecting you, you're vulnerable. And I bet you there are areas you're vulnerable. You need this. Try it. Barracuda Threat Analyzer. Get a full report. It's free. It'll show you exactly what you need to do to secure your email. Barracuda's new Threat Analyzer. Barracuda.com/twit. Barracuda.com/twit. We thank them so much for their support of Twit. We had a fun week on This Week in Tech. Talked about NFTs and a lot more. Watch. We got a little video for you.
Solar winds. It's going to be a while before we really get through this stuff.
Yeah.
It may have all started when an intern set an important password to SolarWinds 123. Adding insult to injury, the intern posted it on GitHub.
Oh, I love it.
Oh.
Previously on Twit. Twit News.
Hello, everybody. Leo Laporte here, the very first Twit News live event of 2021, and it's Microsoft Ignite keynote.
Tech News Weekly.
And you may have seen or heard something about NFT, those three letters together.
But what if digital art could have intrinsic value because it's considered one of a kind or one of five, and that's it? So it becomes rare.
This Week in Google.
The Techlash is a summary of the past few years where we have this really strong and widespread negative reaction to the growing power and influence of big tech, specifically the large companies here in Silicon Valley.
Twit, it's where your brain and tech meet.
And then sometimes collide. I hope you enjoyed this week, and I hope you will be with us next week. We've got a lot of great shows planned. Okay, we gave you as much time as we could, Lisa Schmeiser, to look up, what does Tim Wu think of the breakup of the Baby Bells?
It's part of a larger passage he writes about what he calls the age of oligopolies,
yeah.
You know, that flows so much more smoothly on my mental narrative as opposed to the actual physical one. But he notes that a full 75% of industries witnessed increased concentration from the years 1997 to 2012.
Yep.
And
that's normal. That's the way things work, right?
This is apparently the highest number of consolidations since the original trust era.
So we're back in that kind of golden age.
We're back to the this is what
the robber barons.
This is why he used the words Gilded Age in the book title, I would guess.
Yep.
And he points out the AT&T monopoly had been forced to divide into 8 pieces and was allowed over the 2000s to reconstitute itself into Verizon and AT&T. Later, AT&T bought DirecTV and then Time Warner to return close to the size it was in the 1980s. Wow. And then he adds, the idea of allowing AT&T to come back in such a fashion was shocking to those who thought the breakup was important to competition.
So the failure was not the breakup, but the failure was to allow them to realign.
To reconstitute. Yeah.
And I have
he
to
finished
say,
his whole litany by pointing out that many of these combinations actually happened during the Obama administration.
That's right, where he was in office. You know, he was there, and I wonder if he's going to try to fix it this time around. I mean, the thing that bothers me the most is the giant mergers between content companies and delivery companies, where Comcast owns NBC, Universal. Really pretty much every news organization is owned by a big organization that is a delivery company. I mean, that to me is the worst kind of a monopoly. And I think we're seeing it, and I think we're seeing the results of it, frankly. It's not very good. Can we talk about Ignite, Lisa?
Sure. What would you like to talk about?
Alex Kipman. And Guy La Liberté, and this was the end of the Ignite keynote, where they showed what life in the mesh is going to look like. And by the way, they ended the keynote with this. Those people who are making popping sounds and are having hearts coming out of their head are actually in the audience. This, unfortunately, was the part of Ignite the public saw, and I think the reaction of the public to this weird Burning Man was, is this really, what did Microsoft make a mistake here? This is literally how they ended. Satya Nadella, the CEO, began this keynote. Alex Kipman, the inventor of HoloLens, he invented Connect before it, or developed Connect before it, showing what the future of Microsoft Mesh was, HoloLens, getting together in virtual world. If you get a headache from Zoom, wait till you go there with no arms and no legs, dancing around a digital fire. I don't know. Maybe it's just
so. I feel like the demo is dumb.
You're going to defend the technology.
I'm going to defend the technology, and I think I've talked about this before on your show. I've been fortunate enough to do some HoloLens demos, and the thing that struck me was how it's going to it is just I had to hide it because all I could I kept flashing back to like 1995 virtual environments when I was
it is a little Second City-ish. It's Second City meets Burning Man.
Second Life.
No, I can't.
Second Life, not Second City. Sorry.
Second City would be amazing.
No, that would be incredible.
Wouldn't it be? Because you'd have like improv, which is what this demo clearly needs. But the thing that's great, the thing that I find really interesting about HoloLens is it's really going to enhance edge computing, and it's going to get Microsoft into places where desktop computing and networks don't necessarily go. And the reason I think this is a dumb demo is because you could do something so much cooler, like have somebody at the bottom of a lake being given instructions on how to disassemble something that's down there simply by using that equipment.
And to be fair, they showed a lot of that at other Ignite sessions, and even in Nadella's keynote and so forth. I think it was maybe a strategic error to to highlight the.
Yeah, like the thing
There's so many better
has
ways.
never been-
There are so many better ways. Sorry, Lisa. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say there are just
saying.
so many better ways of doing virtual environments. You know, if the point is to show that, you know, during this, you know, we can all be remotely connected. You know, I have a pretty regular putt golf VR Saturday with my friend, and that is, you know, we hang out and we shoot the shit. And we play a little bit of golf in Oculus, and it's like a lot less weird than whatever that was. And I'm pretty sure that technology is a lot cooler. So it seems like they just made the worst of all worlds there, purely from a consumer point of view. Lisa, I'm sure it has some very good stuff behind it.
Yeah, I mean, the HoloLens technology itself is stunningly good.
Is it really?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. I'll take that. I'll take your word for that. Okay.
You know, it is like I've seen a lot of it applied to stuff like you know, AEC and other things that are much more driven by need and people that are willing to put those goggles on and everything else. And it's, when you see it working, it's just kind of amazing. It's the best one out there right now. And it's,
do you imagine
the
mixture
of AR
you do right now in Zoom being kind of become more of these virtual meeting things? That
maybe I think someday, but not that. You know, the problem is that I like one of the problems with just to talk to the Stanford article for a second to tie it back into that, they were talking about, they're referring back to old studies that they've done where they said, okay, well, we put avatars and people looked at the avatars. And as soon as they said that, I stopped reading like that part, because I was like, avatars don't mean anything, because the reason is that there is so much going on. If you want to kind of get an idea of how far away we are with all the money we have, when you look at the digital doubles inside of, some of the Star Wars sequels, where they had the general or the even Princess Leia, they are so close, and still it's like, oh, that's weird.
There's still like uncanny valley. There really is.
But the thing is that is with incredible amounts of resources and all the time in the world to render and getting to look at it over and over again. Doing that live, we'll see. I mean, and again, it is like the Unreal work that's being done right now with metahumans is amazing. But I don't want to have an avatar of me trying to be like that, because I know that sub-millimeter movement in my eyes makes a difference to the person on the other side. And that's why a lot of these kind of Second Life things don't work as well as just video for the time being, because it just, every little thing that we do with our face, we spend our entire life looking at other people's faces and making decisions by little things they did with their eyebrows and the way that they did it, and again, how often they blinked, and just when I squeeze my eyes just a little bit, that means something, and so that when we dumb that down, it's a dehumanizing experience, and it's going to be until we crush it, and we are not going to crush it for another decade at least. Like we're not going to get to that point where there'll be outliers that go, okay, this is really cool. I mean, still people are still using Second Life, and there's
a coolness to it, but it's not.
There is, but
I agree.
But it's going to be hard to overcome authentic communication to people that we can see. So I think that especially like what we see in our in office hours was that there was a big jump when we went to 1080p. You see everybody better.
Interesting, really.
And so so there was a difference in energy just based on the fact that now the people at the far end of the webinar are not looking at 640 by 360. And so I think that there is we're going to get there. I'm not saying that we're not, because we absolutely are. But we knew that we were going to get to video too in the 50s. We had the Jetsons, and we knew that this eventually would happen. It just took us a long time to, our imagination takes a little while to fulfill.
Well, this anybody who's followed technology for a while kind of should be used to this. First attempts are often rough and unimpressive,
but it's better kept under wraps. That's all.
Maybe do it in secret.
Like
and don't invite Gila Liberté of Cirque du Soleil to do
what they did. So I mean, everybody wants to be cool like Apple so much that they just want to put on a great demo. That's, and they like, how do we create that imagination? Yeah. And Apple's pretty conservative about how they do that, and they do it inside of a little box that keeps that's pretty safe. And the problem is that unfortunate thing is that Microsoft's HoloLens is just an amazing technology, but it's really in the kind of enterprise world, and it should stay there until it's really ready to come out. And it was not ready for that meeting. So,
and there's nothing wrong with Microsoft being an enterprise-focused company
absolutely.
with consumers.
Absolutely.
I feel like the thing you should actually pay attention to with Microsoft's keynotes is they are uncommonly transparent in laying out what their product roadmap is going to be and where they are going to be pushing their customers.
Right.
And like Nadella always just like lays it right out there. And then all you have to do is watch the company execute like over the next 1 or 2 years after every keynote. And you'll see that he basically says, okay, in 2015, he said, we're mobile first, we're cloud first, that's it. And you can basically pinpoint that moment to when the company put the pedal to the metal on Azure. And although they rolled out Windows 10 that year, it was also effectively the end of Microsoft as a desktop computing operating system company, because they went to continuous operating system updates as opposed to really big events. And they also started moving away from the computer as the hub of your work experience and towards the idea that your cloud of data and how you manipulate it is your computing experience. And then they doubled down on that with digital transformation. And then they're doing it again this year with the big statements they make about ubiquitous decentralized computing. Like this is them saying, we're going to own the edge, and they're going to do it with a lot of the technology aimed at first line workers. They're going to do it with HoloLens. This also goes into their plan to capitalize on ambient intelligence. And I just really love how Nadella finished his comments by taking direct aim at like both Amazon and Facebook without saying a word either. Like if the company would just be like, this is what we do, we don't need to be cool, we wouldn't have the need to just cringe with secondhand embarrassment when Burning Man meets Second Life in the desert.
Yeah. Well, he said, okay, so next time we do this, I want you to join us, because I watch these Nadella things and find it hard to grab anything concrete. But there were 3 words he used that I thought were interesting. He mentioned privacy, and obviously I think privacy is increasingly on everybody's mind, so that sounds sensible. He talked about sovereignty, and now tell me what he means in this context about sovereignty. Does he mean respecting national borders so that
it's compliance? It's basically
compliance. Okay.
Yeah, it's basically them saying that although they're going to lead with privacy, saying, listen, our data tools don't expose you, and whatever data analysis we do is anonymized, and so on and so forth. What he's also saying when he talks about data sovereignty is he's saying if you store your data in this specific region of the country, world, actually, then we're going to argue that it's only subject to the laws in that region and not to the laws you're trying to enforce in another part of the world.
It almost seems like sovereignty and privacy are in conflict because, well, certainly in the U.S. or China, if you are adhering to the laws of those countries, you're not going to have much privacy. If my data is on
back and forth. Microsoft's been battling the U.S. on this for years because the U.S. kept trying to download data that was in an Irish data center. Right. And Microsoft kept saying, no, the data lives in Ireland, therefore it's Irish data. Just because we're an American company doesn't mean that it's that we consider all the data to be American.
And then the third word he used, which I thought was very important and maybe a challenge for Microsoft, but is clearly what Microsoft needs to do, is trust. They really need to, they need to establish that people can trust them. And I'm not just talking about security flaws, although that's certainly part of it. But Apple's doing something similar. I don't think they have the sovereignty piece, but they talk about privacy and they talk about trust. And I think that if you're going to compete against Amazon, Google, and Facebook, that's a pretty good place to compete from. Privacy and trust, right?
The quote, because what the context is when he brought up his big trust by design point, is he said, fundamentally, a technology provider should succeed only when it helps the world around it succeed. No customer wants to be dependent on a vendor who sells them technology on one end and competes with them on the other. So I thought that his use of the word trust was also a pretty interesting signal into the way the company is positioning itself as we're not just a tech company. We recognize that we're part of a larger global society, and we're aware that our actions have an impact on the society. So you can trust that when we roll out our products, of course, we're thinking about that. Whether or not this is true is a completely different issue than how they're positioning it. But I think it's been interesting that Satya Nadella has consistently talked about how he sees a tech company rising or falling based on how well they place themselves into the context of a global society and what a global society needs.
It seems.
Do you think it's interesting, Lisa? Do you think, because when I think about the trust issue and particularly when it comes to Microsoft, vis-a-vis, as you say, Leo, let's compare it to how far do we think about trust compared to Google or Facebook.
Right.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting that of the four big CEOs, so Sundar Pichai at Google, Zuckerberg at Facebook, Satya at Microsoft, and Tim Cook at Apple, Satya is the only one that's written a book, and is the only one that's actually put on paper anything like a manifesto as to kind of what he thinks and what he stands for. And there's something really interesting in that idea of the fact that, in a sense, he's being, and I'm sure you've read his book. I mean, it's an absolutely fantastic read, whether you're working in a big company or trying to. I mean, it's absolutely for a Microsoft book, transformed how I think about startups. But it's fascinating that he's the only person that's been that transparent and is the one person that's harping on about trust in a world where you don't really know anything about Zuckerberg or Sundar or we know a little bit about Tim Cook, but there's not even a biography really of Tim Cook. And it is weird,
a Microsoft tradition, though. Remember, Bill Gates wrote a number of these kind of manifestos. I don't think Ballmer did.
And Brad Smith, who's Microsoft's chief legal counsel, has also written a pretty good book about what he perceives the upcoming legal and technological challenges in the next few years is. To address the point, what makes Nadella stand apart from the other CEOs, part of me wonders how much of it, because I don't know how much of it is character, simply this is who he is, and how much of it is this is a really smart market positioning strategy. Because you don't have a lot of other big enterprise companies. I sit through a lot of keynotes from a lot of big vendor conferences and big tech conferences every year. And although you can practically set up the bingo card with transform the world, change the world for the better. There's like all of these phrases where it's always technology is the solution to the problem. We see this. But what I find really interesting is how Nadella consistently comes back to themes like we need to make sure that there's economic opportunity for all, that tech doesn't just continue to concentrate wealth in some areas in some countries. And he comes back to that over and over again. And then he talks about how he wants to see tech as something that empowers people as a tool in greater social transformation. And so part of me is like, is this just a really canny CEO who sees which way the winds are blowing with regards to how governments all around the world are looking at tech companies and going, maybe we should start taking a look at how well our laws are serving us regarding the way these guys do business and how it impacts the rest of our markets.
You could almost say the same thing about Tim Cook.
Yeah.
Where you look at it, you go, this looks like a man of integrity and honesty. It could just be a marketing stance. But I think there's a lot of similarity between the two of them.
And I think there's a lot of similarity because they also had the unenviable task of trying to keep a company on an upward trajectory after following behind
the
people
founder
who
leaves.
were And although people will say, well, there was Steve Ballmer. Ballmer was basically one of the Bill Gates apparatus.
Right.
Nadella is the first one to arguably come out of a different
he's done a
cohort.
Great job, as has Tim Cook, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. And
I think for all of these companies, their public persona is going to become more and more important, and probably for every company, your public persona, how you're seen by your users, by the governments, whether you're making a positive impact on the world. I think that there was a belief a decade ago that all you have to do is make good products. Like your products serve the world.
That's Steve Jobs' point of view. Yeah.
Yeah. And Oracle, Ellison was kind of has purported that as well. And that, that's their job. And I think that now a lot of companies are going to have to figure out ways to do more. And that might be what they do as far as a public citizen, what they support. Apple is spending $100 million on diversity. They could spend more, and they probably will. And so, but of moving the world forward, and I think that they need to do a lot more of that, because that will if they do it in a way that at least feels authentic, even inauthentic will help them. But you look at it's different in the United States. Coca-Cola is not that big of a deal. It is. It's a big company, but it's not like a brand that you wear on a sweatshirt. That you wear. Like most people wouldn't wear like a nice fleece with a Coca-Cola. But Coca-Cola is seen that way in Africa. When I'm in Africa, Coca-Cola provides water, and they provide signs, and they do all the stuff that is part of the community. And people, like I asked someone that had a really nice fleece, and a pretty wealthy person in Zimbabwe, and and I said, "So do you work for Coca-Cola?" And he's like, "No." Why would I work for Coca-Cola? But he has this nice sweater and this nice.
Yeah.
But they did. But we don't. But their brand doesn't feel that way anymore. And I think that more and more brands have to think about how do we get to that point? Because
especially in an age of increased scrutiny and regulation.
Well, and also in an age where
that kind of defends you against some of that.
Well, and I think that also in an age where advertising is going to be less and less effective.
Yes.
So advertising is so they have to figure out a way, and I think that the move that we're talking about of a community-based marketing, community-based sales is going to be more and more and more important. You have to get people into a community and have them part of what you're doing, and you have to figure out how you serve that community effectively to get to the next step. And I think that people are starting to talk about that a little bit more than they used to. And I think that we'll see a lot more in that area.
As George Burns said, sincerity. If you can fake that, you got it made. Thanks to Retcon in our chat room for that one. We're going to take a little break, and then the seeds and the stems, all the stuff that's sifted to the bottom of the rundown on the show today. Will Harris, it's great to have you here. Is Twit any different these days, you think? Do you feel like it's coming home to a show that you know, or do you feel like it's a little different these days? I'm just curious. You can be honest.
It's definitely better organized than when it was just you.
Thanks. That's fair.
There's a producer, and you get a rundown, and there's a document, and it's very well organized. And Leo, I definitely remember us winging it a few times back in the day. So, in all other ways, it feels very much like just getting together with a bunch of old friends, which is exactly what a podcast should feel like, whether you're in it or listening to it, shouldn't it?
If only we could have a little bit of beer between us, it would be perfect.
Oh, it's the dream.
It's great to have you, Will. It's good to see you again. And of course, my old friend Alex Lindsay, who never left. In fact, he's going to be back on Tuesday for Mac Break Weekly. And we're so glad we got you back on the show.
It's good to be back.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't know how you find time. You're on the air pretty much all the time now.
Yeah, it's fun.
You do 8 hours of office hours, and you do a couple hours of Mac Break Weekly, and I don't know, have you time for work?
It's pre-existing. It's like, I already do this. Well, I work most of the rest of the time.
You do it. You're just working the whole. It's all work.
It's all work. So it's a long day.
Lisa Schmeiser. The only thing I regret is that you couldn't bring us Girl Scout cookies.
Me too.
We will get you back in the studio as soon as possible. We're working on it. It's really great to have
I did buy some. I couldn't help it.
Did you?
You're talking about, I was like, you can order Girl Scout cookies? I just ordered them from my local troop. I was like,
I'm so glad to hear that. That's great.
Everybody should do that.
I want some mint cookies. I haven't had mint cookies in like a decade. I was like, my kids have probably never had them in their whole life.
Put them in the fridge first. They're amazing in the freezer. They're amazing when they're cold. Yeah.
Thin mints.
Oh, yeah.
I like the Samoas myself.
I got one of those too.
Yeah, those are awfully
there
good.
you go. Good tasting cookies.
What is the number one seller? Is it the Thin Mints? It must be.
It's got to be Thin Mints. Yeah.
It's got to be.
Now I'm really hungry. Well, you know what? It's perfect time to talk about Uber for Business. Now, I know you know about Uber and rideshare, but Uber is more than that. In fact, Uber for Business is a great way for your business to stand out with your customers or to make employees feel extra valued. You can use Uber for Business to set up vouchers so that you can say, for instance, to your employees, hey, let me buy you lunch today since you all came to work, or you're working at home and you all came to the Zoom meeting. You could use Uber for Business to give them a ride if you want to have them come into work. It's a great way to request rides and order meals from the restaurants you love It always has been, but Uber for Business makes it possible for your company to do that for your customers and employees. 160,000 companies now use Uber for Business to improve customer and employee satisfaction. A great way to get people to show up or stay engaged in virtual team meetings or events. You can, with vouchers from Uber for Business, you can add $20 to their personal Uber accounts. They can order meals through Uber Eats before the meeting. You could buy them a cup of coffee. If you want to make your customers love your business even more, you offer them a voucher for a free ride when they make their first purchase or spend a certain amount. It's easy, by the way, and this is the best part. You can sign up for free and immediately start delivering extra value to the people who matter most to your business. Vouchers are simple to send. They're easy for your customers to redeem. You get total control over not only who gets it, but when they expire, even what portion of the ride or meal you want to cover. You share them via email or text. Redemption is easy, a single tap. Best of all, you only pay for rides they take or meals they order, which is a great, great thing. Zoom uses them. Coca-Cola uses them. That's a great way to spiff your employees, to thank your customers. And right now, for a limited time, you get a $50 voucher when you create your first vouchers campaign and spend $200 or more. Go to uber.com/twit, UBER, of course, uber.com/twit to learn more. Some terms and conditions apply on that $50 voucher, but I think that's a pretty nice way to get started. A $50 voucher when you create your first vouchers campaign and spend $200 or more. Go to uber.com/twit. Thank you, Uber.
Uber for Business has been an absolute lifesaver for Intel through the pandemic.
You use it?
We've been absolutely loving it. So for the few occasions that we've had to do in-person meetings where we have to do socially distant meetings, we can get Ubers for the team in. We used to go to the pub for lunch every week, but now all the employees can get Uber Eats delivered on our business account, and we have a virtual lunch. So I can give you a little bit of a customer recommendation on the Uber for Business. It makes life a lot easier.
I'm thinking Girl Scouts for Business, where you have cookies sent before the Zoom meeting would be.
Can we do a team up? Can we get the Girl Scouts on Uber Eats?
That would be good. I need Samoas and I need them now. Actually, we were talking about Microsoft and AWS. I saw a story, kind of a shock. The Pentagon is now so pissed over Amazon suing Microsoft over that $10 billion Jedi program. They know that this lawsuit's going to go on for years, putting everything on hold. They are at the point of just dropping the whole thing entirely.
Sorry.
Which makes Jeff Bezos very happy. He said, if it can't be mine, it can't be yours, Microsoft.
Well, Oracle's probably also cackling a little bit over that too.
Yeah, Oracle was in the running. This was a big contract, $1 billion a year for 10 years. It was to provide Department of Defense secure cloud for the Department of Defense. And, I think that Amazon felt like the president at the time, President Trump, didn't think that Amazon should get it and kind of pushed it toward Microsoft. That was the basis of their lawsuit. Who knows? It might not even matter. Jeez. I swear.
It's probably that a rebid will take less time than a legal attack.
Exactly.
So that, you basically force everybody back to zero and start redoing it. They'll probably like, well, this will take 5 years to litigate, or 3 years, or 2 or 3 years to get it. So
4 to 5 years before this is over. We didn't mention this from Ignite, and actually I didn't know what a big deal it is, but I've heard from a lot of people. Microsoft announced that Power Automate Desktop is free for all Windows 10 users. Is that a big deal, Lisa?
You're putting me on the spot here.
It's a low-code, no-code
No, it's low-code,
solution.
no-code. That's the
thing.
The reason I would argue it's a big deal is because it amplifies one of the points that Nadella did make in his keynote, which is that he fully expects within 5 years you will not need to have coders so much because you will have tools that can do the coding for you.
It's kind of a drag and drop interface. You're not really writing code, but you can automate a lot of the things you do. It was at least $15 a month. So a lot of people, I was surprised, wrote me or texted me or chatted me saying, this is fantastic. We're so excited about Power Automate. So
lets you automate a lot of business processes. So you can have people who run reports, and they're either not dependent on getting developers to build them the tools to do it, or having somebody whose job is just to figure out how to run the reports. So in a way, this flattens out and democratizes the ability to analyze data and to come up with new ways to mine insights and then act on them. And that's great. I still think the biggest thing to get out of this is that it will have the same effect on the market for coding jobs that WYSIWYG HTML editors had on the market for quote unquote web editors and web developers. Because you remember for a while there was like a period of maybe 3 years where if you were really good at HTML and style sheets, you could hand code beautiful websites and beautiful web templates and so on and so forth. And then everybody developed decent WYSIWYG editors, and all of a sudden you didn't have to have somebody who knew how to use headings tags. You could just do it yourself in Dreamweaver or whatever. Right. So, and I think we're about to see that happen with coding, because it's getting to the point, since all coding is based on a really strict grammar in any artificial computer language, and the functions that you can enact with that grammar, it's not going to be that hard to completely automate that process.
I think
Is it wrong that the name just makes me think of Microsoft Power Tools for like Windows 95?
No,
I saw this headline and I was like, what, can I automate the changing of my screensaver? Is this?
You could actually, but
let's just imagine like a sentient drill where all of a sudden it's like, no, I'm going to put up your pictures for you.
Power automate.
I mean, I think that the thing is that there's such a strong demand for coders and such a lack of supply that it's going to take a long time to kind of get that going. And from what I understand, I mean, I don't understand the Power Automate as well, but I mean, it looks a lot like Salesforce automation that you're dragging and dropping.
Yeah,
so it's for processing data, sure. For actually building the tools, I'm not, like, to put an app out somewhere.
It's nothing like hand coding. No, I'm sorry.
But I think that like, for instance, Apple, I think, is missing a huge opportunity between the kind of the basic automation that you get with the, I can't think of the tool right now.
Automator
Automator, but the one that's on the that they bought.
Shortcuts. Yeah.
Shortcuts. So you have shortcuts on one side, then you have Swift on the other, and what's missing right in the middle is a nodal coding platform. That you can sit there and just say, now, does it do everything that the code does? No. You would still need to write it. But we did this with a compositing app where you could build these things that's very much like code. It's how I'm going to process all these images. But you could open up a node and just put code in. You just drop code in. I don't have to write all the rest of this. I only have to write this one piece that there's no node for. And so I think that if Apple did that, or other people did more of that kind of programming interface, you'd end up with a lot more people developing it. I think this is good. I mean, when I look at it of what it is from the surface, I think it looks good. It's not, but I don't think it'll replace many coders. It'll make it easier to do a lot more with the data, which is incredibly powerful.
Will,
it'll make things easier.
Do you have in-house coders? I mean, you've got front end because you've got an iOS application, but you also have, I'm sure, a lot of back end coding that you have to do.
Yeah,
as well.
we do everything. We do everything in house. Obviously, we write the iOS app in Swift. Everything runs on AWS in the back end, I have to say. Back to our earlier point, but for me, the thing about Power Automate, it kind of feels a little bit analogous to me as like when you first got the ability to do really interesting macros in Excel.
Yeah.
And suddenly you could automate really stuff that was really complex and required insane, levels of coding. It's like, I can write a macro that just builds a pivot table that does that now. And it feels like it kind of exploding that up to a bigger
You're
level.
Actually not far off.
You're not wrong. That's not so much taking a coder's job so much as making it easier for somebody who already has a job to do something like way quicker, or to
that's exactly the target.
Suddenly increase 10x the amount that you can do.
I think Microsoft said it actually is for the people who are using Excel right now to do their code. That's
I'm not saying that
I know a lot of
jobs
people
are going to be gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm not saying coding jobs are going to be gone tomorrow. I'm just saying that they're being aimed at.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's a broader scope.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a broader trend that they're habituating people to the idea that, hey, I too can write the logical process, and I know how to categorize this data, so I know what I want done with it.
Let's see. There's a lot of little stories here. I'm a fan of the Brave browser. It's an interesting take on taking Google's Chrome browser, taking out the privacy invasion material, but using the Chromium engine and then making a privacy-first browser. They're taking another bite out of the Google apple. They just bought a search engine. I don't know how good it will be, but their goal is to create a no tracking, no profiling, perhaps even a paid-for, no-ad version of a search engine to run in the Brave browser. They bought it from Clix, CLIQZ, which was another privacy-focused browser shut down last year. You mentioned this at the beginning of the show. I did want to get to it. I don't know exactly what it means, but Google has announced that they're going to make third-party cookies obsolete. You mentioned this, Will.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
So we all know the kind of the cookies that follow us. You know, you shop for one thing online and suddenly that follows you around the web. So there are an awful lot of third-party advertisers that rely on effectively buying your data out of Google and retargeting you. And what Google has announced basically is that they're going to stop people doing that and stop other people sort of effectively doing this market of trading personal information where, one advertising company does a deal with another advertising company, you link up their cookies and those cookies then all track you and you get these sort of, massive advertising networks. Google is playing this really cleverly because they're playing it as a nod to privacy and saying that actually what we're doing is stopping so much of this tracking that happens around the web. And of course, Apple already does that with its mobile browsers for Safari, for example, already stops third-party cookies. But of course, the incidental and completely coincidental side effect of enforcing this kind of new privacy-focused rule is that it puts an awful lot of emphasis on first-party cookies, i.e., spending money with the people who actually have your data, i.e. Google. Ooh. So suddenly, I don't need to buy somebody's, Google search history and then retarget them using a third-party advertiser. If I want to do that, I've got to go directly to Google because that's privacy.
Yeah.
But it also looks an awful lot more like Google reining in other people on its customers.
Very good point. I think I was suspicious, but I didn't know why I was suspicious. Now I understand. It promotes
one of the interesting side effects is that, of course, Google, has been accused of killing the media industry in many, many ways. But if first-party cookies are one of the only types of cookies that are going to be allowed, so you can only be tracked by the site that you're on and not have that tracking follow you elsewhere, that makes destination places extremely valuable. So suddenly news sites where media sites where you turn up regularly, those cookies get an awful lot more valuable. So, for example, I know from historical experience, we'd have people that wanted advertisers that wanted to buy campaigns with magazines that I've worked at in the past, and they'd buy a small portion of that audience and then use that to drop a cookie that they could then retarget on one of the cheaper advertising networks. And so you could buy a high quality customer and then target them on cheaper sites all across the web. So, of course, what that means now is that data won't be accessible and that they'll have to only buy with the quality publication that they're after, or Google. Wow. So as much as Google is being accused lots of killing the media industry, this might end up being a bit of a win for media companies that run their own operations.
Interesting. Californians are not leaving the state en masse. This article, a little bit of schadenfreude from the LA Times. Californians aren't leaving the state en masse, but they are leaving San Francisco. Study says. LA Times just a little too happy over that. Apparently, a great number of people are leaving San Francisco, but instead of moving out of state, they're moving to the snow, to the Sierra counties, so they can ski more. I think they'll probably be coming back this summer. Net domestic air exits from the Bay Area have increased 178% during the pandemic, a 9% increase in departures, and a 21% decrease in entrances. So, far more people are leaving than coming back. But they tend not to be leaving California. It's about the same as it ever was. So the rumors of people leaving the Golden State are greatly exaggerated. And when they do leave, by the way, they
Golden
don't.
Gate Bridge, less so.
Yeah, right. It's not actually gold. I just want everybody to know ahead of time because I don't want you to be disappointed when you get here.
Well, and it's it's so expensive in San Francisco.
I know. I understand why people.
I moved out because I was just like, wow, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. My apartment that I had in Nob Hill was a tiny little, really tiny little apartment. I think that I had it at $1,600 a month, and I think that for some reason I was curious. $1,600 a month, and it was like a little 2-bedroom. No, I'm sorry, 1-bedroom in Nob Hill, nice little area. Yeah. But now it's like $5,600 a month. I saw it come up.
Holy
in something.
cow!
It was $5,600 a month.
$5,600 a month for
it is like
bedroom?
it's barely a 1-bedroom. It's like a glorified studio. It's got some doors that close between the bedroom and the living room area, but it's all one long room. Now I will admit, top floor, and you can go up on the roof, and it's really cool. But it is $5,600.
I should check to see. Well, my old studio apartment it was up on Telegraph Hill. Yeah, I bet you it was $1,000 in 1994. I don't wonder what it is now.
Jeez.
Oh, yeah. At that time, I remember thinking, I don't know if I can afford that.
Oh, it was a lot. I mean, it was only because my wife and I could afford it. I mean, that was the whole thing, is that we could have $1,600. And this is like, I don't know, 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. But it was.
Nintendo's planning a Switch for Christmas with a bigger Samsung OLED display. Can't wait to play Animal Crossing on that.
4K output.
4K output.
So this is the most. So I think I'm the only person in the world that plays their Switch more on the big screen than handheld.
No, I'm with you.
I really dislike playing that thing handheld.
I got the dock, and unfortunately I have the pandemic Animal Crossing addiction, which is not unusual, but it looks so much nicer on the 4K screen, and I could sit on the couch and use the controller and
use the nice controller, the Pro controller, which I think is still the best controller. Possibly the PS5 DualSense is now better, but I'm really excited. The idea of a 4K, getting 4K Mario or something is really exciting. I just wonder if they'll finally take the opportunity to put Netflix on that thing, because you still can't watch Netflix on the Switch. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. John McAfee accused of $13 million in scalping, fraud, and money laundering with cryptocurrency. The guy who created McAfee antivirus sold it a long time ago.
I can't figure out whether that guy's a genius or just crazy. It's just insane. Like maybe a little both.
He's a character. He's a character.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like just wow.
Yeah.
That's all I gotta say.
Yeah. Just thought I'd give you an update for those of you wondering whatever happened to John McAfee. Just want to give you
that was the famous joke about Paul Otellini, the late great CEO of Intel, who bewilderingly bought McAfee the company.
Yeah.
And the joke in journalism circles when I was in that world was always that Otellini yelled at his secretary and said, "Somebody get me McAfee antivirus." They came back a week
bought the whole
later
company.
and said, "We've got it for you, sir. It cost you however many billion." And he was like, "No, I meant for my computer." Because nobody could work out why he bought it at the time.
Oh no, and they sold it on. I think they lost a pretty penny on that. They sold it on.
Yeah.
I think we could wrap this up. I don't know about you. I'm excited. I got to run home and see the season ender of WandaVision.
We won't spoil it for you then.
No, don't spoil it. Was it good, John? John's going crazy. He's been pushing me to watch this. I had to sit through the first episode, what was it, a Dick Van Dyke clone, and then the second episode, I was like, this is awful.
Only one thing to say.
Theo.
Ship of Thesis.
Say again?
Ship of
Ship
Thesis.
Oh,
of
no,
Thesis.
no, John, don't say it. Don't say it.
I don't know what that means, so you're safe.
No,
Yes.
you'll get there. You'll get there. Also, you can go home and the All-Star game's on tonight. I'm going to be staying. I'm staying up after this and watching the All-Star game.
You're an NBA fan?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
I've got some money riding on this. So this is going to be an exciting
Team
day.
LeBron versus Team Durant.
Although it's not really Team Durant because Durant is not playing.
Oh.
And two people just got COVIDed out this morning.
Oh, wow.
So it's going to be an interesting game for sure.
Well, we know what you and I will be doing tonight. What about you, Lisa Schmeiser? Do you have anything on the agenda?
Family dinner. That's about it. We usually try to have a family dinner and games on Sunday night as a way to wrap up the weekend and transition into the week.
You're not going to be watching the Meghan and Harry interview?
No. Oh my gosh, no. I'm going to wait for some site to do 10 things you should have seen in the Meghan and Harry interview, and it will take me 30 seconds to read the salient talking points, and I will have kept those hours of my life.
It's Oprah. I'm just teasing you. Alex Lindsay, you're probably just going to do another 3 hours on Office Hours tonight.
The thought had crossed my mind, but that's not until tomorrow. We do Monday nights as well as the Monday mornings, and then we do Wednesday. We do Clubhouse as a test. Like we're playing with Clubhouse, and so it's so we've been trying that. But tonight I during the commercial breaks I made bread.
What? I saw you getting up.
I had to knead it a couple of times to get it to where it needed to be so that we could have pizza. So the bread. Oh my
God, that's awesome.
So I was like, I got to pull it out. I had to autolyze it, and then I had to do that. Like it was like I figured I got 2 minutes while Leo's talking to do it. So
this whole time,
this is the COVID.
Alex has been punching his dough down the whole time.
This is how Alex avoids Zoom fatigue, is he's making pizza in the middle of his meetings.
That's the way. That's the way to do it.
I think we need to study that.
Do that every day.
As a
The problem was that my wife reminded me that she needed bread for this pizza
it's
right
your
before
turn
the
to make
show,
pizza
and I was like, oh no, like it takes 2.5 hours to rise, and if I don't do it right now, there'll be a thing. And
now, do you have a
like,
fancy pizza oven?
I do. I have the Uni.
Oh,
Uni one.
I got one too.
Yeah,
those are
amazing.
Great. It uses pellets, right?
No, I have the one that uses gas.
Gas.
I had the one that made pellets, and then I
love the pellet one. It gets to 850 degrees.
Yeah. So does the gas one. But you just turn on little things.
It's a little easier.
just goes there. Yeah. So it's but my wife makes ones that are kind of pan pizza that she makes that don't need. I make those ones, but she just makes these ones. It's a different kind of dough, Leo. This dough is for her pizzas. My dough is a lighter, more Neapolitan dough. This is the COVID reality is that you get really good at baking.
Yeah.
I
finally put my sourdough in the freezer and said no. In fact, I joined Noom, that diet program. It's not Zoom, it's Noom, but it's got the same fatigue. So because I
was just about to ask.
I have the COVID 20 that I want to get rid of.
I have to admit that we've gotten so good at cooking as a family.
It's good, isn't it?
It's kind of it. Yeah, I'm really interested to see how this all turns out in the future, just because I just don't see us going out very often.
Yeah.
Like I don't.
Lisa said that last night. She said, we haven't been eating that. It was takeout, but we haven't been doing takeout because we cook and it's fun. It's
fun. And we have a glass of wine and and you make it and you talk about the day and it's what everyone tells you. You should learn. And the thing is that I cook a fair bit, but my wife barely cooked at all, and now she's really good. She's much better than I am, and so that's been the big turn. My wife's better than I am at cooking.
Wow. So this is the gas uni, huh? I have to take a look at that. I have the pellet uni. Oh man, it's good
magical.
Pizza. It cooks it in a minute.
Yeah, it's like a minute.
Because it's so hot.
Yeah,
and it's the best pizza.
It's so good.
I have to get though. The mouth of that is a little too narrow for my pizza peel. The thing you slide the pizza in. So I have to get a special narrow.
Well,
pizza peel.
the other big thing though, Leo, is if you're sous vide, you can get that thing up to 900 degrees, and you take your steak and you put it on. They have a little metal one. They have a metal one. You leave it in there for like an hour, or not an hour, but like 20 minutes, 30 minutes while you're right at the end of the sous vide. You just drop it on that pan. It sizzles, and you push it in, and just and again, a minute and a half, and it's like charred.
Did that last night.
Yeah,
I fired up the big green egg though to do the final.
Well, I used to do the green. The thing is that I realized how far I've come because that's what I was using before. That was the big green egg. But the thing is now I've got this little gas thing that just does it really fast.
Upgrade.
It's just super easy. Yeah, it's
guys.
super
I can
easy.
see a new show on the Twit network.
Oh yeah, every time we
this
get
week
together.
In pandemic cooking.
Yeah, pandemic
This
cooking.
week in baking.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. I
Mac
appreciate.
Bake Weekly. Oh my
Mac
gosh.
Bake Weekly. Oh my God.
Oh,
Quick, get the URL.
yeah, exactly. Before we just said it out loud.
Want to know? Damn. Want to know more about office hours? Go to youtube.com/Alex Lindsay, LINDSAY. There's a Zoom link hidden there in the comments, but you can watch previous office hours. He only records 1/3 of the total show. So if
We started 5. That's
5 a.m.
That's the pre-show.
Pacific time.
Yeah, the 5 a.m. the pre-show, and then there's 6 is the pre-show, and then 7 to 9 is the show that you see on YouTube, and then there's the post-show that goes on. I usually just say hi to everybody, and then they talk for hours. Like it just keeps going. So yeah,
it is mostly about production.
Yeah,
but you have a band now. It's really kind of.
We did 3.5 hours or almost 4 hours of the band breaking down how they made this song. These are people that have never met each other. Amazing musicians, like someone who professionally arranged the whole piece, and then there was saxophone and keyboard and drums and all kinds of instruments, guitar, bass, everything, and they recorded it all separately, and they brought it all back into Logic, and we had this incredible. Someone really mixed it, a very professional mix.
It sounds
in
great.
Logic. It sounds great, and then they, but then the best part is then they edited a video. They all shot a video, and then it got edited incredibly in Final Cut, and then sent to Resolve, and then color corrected in Resolve.
Oh my God.
At full quality. It's quite a thing to see, and so I'm just kind of amazed. The band just kind of literally just came out of the the ether. There was a couple of folks, Grant and Victor, did a Christmas song, and then we were like, we need a band, and then they just made it, and now they're working on the next song, and we've got other artists now talking about joining the band, so and so it's going to keep growing.
It's cool because in order to do this, you also have to solve some significant technical issues to play simultaneously together and all that stuff.
Well, they're not. They're playing all. The thing is that they're incredible musicians, but they're also very technical. I mean, that's why they're in our group. It's and so it wasn't like they were trying to figure out how to do this. I mean, everybody was doing something that was well within their wheelhouse, and they still had a lot to learn. But it's worth it. That is up on YouTube, I think, from yesterday, and they spent like 3.5 hours, and then a week before they spent just an hour talking about it.
Wow!
But it an amazing production process, and so it's an exciting. I don't know it's a kind of a crazy community. There's 3,000 people. There's 1,000 people on Discord, and now again between 200 and 300 people show up every day. It's kind of a
real party.
I don't even know what to do with it. Yeah.
YouTube.com/Alex Lindsay. IT Pro Today, I want to say magazine, but it's a website. Did it used to be a magazine?
I don't know if it...
I feel like I had a glossy IT Pro Today at some point, but I may not be.
No,
anyway,
I don't think so.
Lisa is senior editor there, Lisa Schmeiser. Do you want to plug the Girl Scout cookie site or anything like that? You could.
I don't, because I'd rather just plug the technology. I would implore everybody to go look for a cookie finder and support your local troop this year.
There you go. Support your local troop. Lisa, great having you. It's so nice to see you. And my old buddy, Will Harris. I'll never forget the time Lisa and I were visiting London, and we just ran into you. Like, on the street. Like, no plan, just ran into you. Like, I know one guy who lives in London, and I met him. It's always a pleasure to see you. Entail, Entlale is the new app. I've got it right here. I cannot wait to listen to it on the way home. Thank you.
Give it a go and let me know what you think. And love to hear from Twit listeners. Just hit me up on at Will Harris with 1L on Twitter and let me know what you think. Would love to hear some stories.
Entail.com if you want to know more. Thank you for being here, Will. It's great to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
We do this show every Sunday afternoon. around about 2:30 Pacific. That's 5:30 Eastern. It's currently 22:30, but we spring forward in a week. So that means we will set the clock forward, so the UTC will go backward. If that makes any sense to you, then you're a better person than I. 2100 UTC starting next week. That's only if you want to watch live. And that really, you don't have to do the math if you don't want to watch live. But the live stream is at twit.tv/live. There is live audio. There's live video. If you're watching live, chat with us live, irc.twit.tv. After the fact, of course, at your own time, in your own time frame, you can listen to the show anytime you want. We put all of our shows up on the website, twit.tv, so you can download audio or video there. There is a YouTube channel devoted to This Week in Tech. In fact, if you go to youtube.com/twit, you can find all of the shows we put up on YouTube, including Twit Bits and Twit News events, our coverage of the Ignite conference and so forth. But then the best way probably is to find a podcast application and subscribe. That way, you will get it automatically the minute it's available after we finish editing it this evening. Download, subscribe, and vote. Actually, leave a review if your platform supports it. That's always great for us. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next time. Another Twit. Bye.